Okay. Just give me 1 second. I just make sure everything's caught up to speed. Okay. I'm just waiting for the stream to catch up. Okay, I think we're good to go. As long as the audio is working properly, which it seems. Okay, perfect. So yeah, the link is there for anyone who wants to join. In the meantime, we can just get into the video and start watching the video, and I'll comment on the video as the video is going along, essentially. And we'll take it from there. So let me share my screen, and then we can get right into it. Boom. Sadly, just for those who don't know, Daniel won't be joining me today. Potentially he'll be back next week, so we'll have him again next week. But for today, it'll just be me. So yeah, let me just share my screen and we can get into the video. And we can, well, I'll comment on the video as it's playing, as in I'll pause it at specific intervals. And then if anyone wants to join, the link is there and we can have a discussion. Okay, share screen. Hold on now. Share screen. Let me just make sure I get up the right video here. It's this one. Yeah, okay. So this should be okay. Let me just make sure that the audio and the sound is working okay. I think it is. We'll continue on. I'll react as it's going along. Just for a bit of context for those who are watching, in case you might be watching for the first time, we're giving a critique of Mormonism, but specifically the Book of Abraham, because of the fact that the Book of Abraham, alongside a number of stuff within the LDS Church, is a clear indication that the LDS Church and faith is, at least from prima facie, seems to be fraudulent and has been labeled as such within academia. But anyway, let's get into the video and let's see what they are saying. So just for those who don't know, the Book of Abraham, the context here is that Joseph Smith claimed through some sort of divine intervention, through some sort of divine channeling, that he was able to produce a translation of these ancient Egyptian papyri, which for the time were not translatable. Obviously, that presents with itself a number of issues, because if you claim to translate something, then you open yourself up to scrutiny in terms of what it is that you translated. Because one thing translators, especially those who know the language, are going to look to is, okay, how accurate is this translation? Is it actually a faithful representation of what the text is saying? And by and large, when the translators have looked at, the non-LDS scholars, by the way, that have looked at Joseph's translation and his methods, which he contains within the Pearl of Great Price, which is one of your standard works, the unanimous conclusion is that his translation is fraudulent. And there's no, look, you can try and special plead your way out of that all you want as a Mormon, but that is the consensus within academia. Once it gets to the point when you have to start to come up with reasons or excuses to discredit academia and discredit scholarly works, it demonstrates, it demonstrates that you clearly are indoctrinated to the point where you're not willing or open to receive any information which is critical, and in this case, specifically damning of what your religion teaches you. But anyway, let's get into the video. I hope the audio plays okay.
I did skip over a section here because I want it's something he brings up. Trent Horn, he just brings up definitions of monotheism. I just didn't feel like it was relevant for the topic of this video, so moved ahead a little bit here, just letting everyone know.
Human pre-existence is not foreign to the Bible either. In Romans, Paul writes, "Those of us whom God took knowledge from eternity, he also foreordained." The renowned Jesuit priest and professor of biblical studies at the Catholic University of America, Joseph A. Fitzmyer, points out that the original Greek of this verse implies that God had a more than speculative knowledge of man. but rather that he knew us with affection or predilection. Christian biblical scholar Robert G. Hamerton Kelly wrote, "The idea of pre-existence is deeply embedded in the biblical traditions."
So I tracked that quote down because I was like, I don't.
Yeah, I'll quickly pause there. That's not the consensus within academia. It's just outright lying, and it's disappointment that Mormons can't be honest with this. The consensus within scholarship, as far as church history is concerned, if you want to talk about the early church, the consistent view is that our souls are not eternal, that we were created by God. God by himself is eternal, and solely God is eternal. But if you're talking about something which is created as a consequence of God's creative power, that very thing has a beginning. God himself does not have a reference point of beginning. This is echoed throughout Scripture consistently, and it's also the scholarly consensus on this. There's no two ways about it. Again, this is a damning doctrine. Okay, similar to as far as Doctrine and Covenants 130 verse 22 is concerned, same situation, right? A body of flesh and bones is tangible as any man's in relation to God the Father. That also is a damning doctrine, which again within church history, Joseph would have been labeled a heretic for. There's multiple doctrines he would have been labeled a heretic for. These are just two examples. We haven't even got into his idea of Heavenly Mother yet, which is something that's came out of his teachings, and was certainly solidified by later church leaders and his belief today by the Mormon Church. But regardless, as I said, when your doctrines are damning and don't line up with the traditions and the teachings of the Bible, as well as the traditions and teachings of what the earliest leaders of the church were saying about Jesus, about God, about man, and then Joseph comes along almost 2,000 years later with complete deviations from all of that. It's clear. It's very easy to categorize the guy in terms of how they would have categorized him had he been living in the 1st and 2nd century. It's he would have been labeled a heretic essentially and kicked out. That's what would have happened. At least if I base it off their writings and what they believed. And the fact that all these church leaders consistently were producing a very standard work for the 2nd and 3rd and 4th century, which is called Against Heresies. Pretty much most of the prominent church leader figures all have a book called Against Heresies, where they go into depth. What is a heretical view, who the heretics are, to point them out so that others are not led astray by them. They're, as I said, they're labeled as such, and I don't see any reason as to why not Joseph would have fallen into the same category, because if the whole point of these leaders in terms of their preservation of the church and how they went about that, which was pointing to individuals who are very, very dangerous because they deviated very, very far from what was already standard practice at that time, it's easy to see how Joseph and why Joseph would have been labeled a heretic and been immediately excommunicated for wayward views and wayward thinking as far as Scripture is concerned. So yeah, but let's continue with the video.
I don't know what's going on here, but that doesn't sound right. That first of all, the Romans verse he's talking about, he doesn't actually say the verse. Romans 8:29, I think, is what he's getting at.
Yeah, he really butchered that.
That's not pre-existence in the sense that we were like these spirit babies or souls living before we were born. It says for those.
It doesn't even say pre-existent.
No,
it says foreknow.
For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. That's not.
There's not a single responsible exegete that would translate it that way.
No, and it gets worse. So I tracked down that quote he just gave. So here it is here. It's in his conclusion of this book here. The idea of pre-existence. Let me see if I can get that a little bit bigger here. Where'd I go there? Yeah, I can zoom in a little bit here just for the idea of pre-existence in both its forms is deeply embedded in the biblical tradition. As protological pre-existence, it describes the nature of entities such as wisdom, Torah, and Christ, and as especially akin to God. In its eschatological form, it is part of the basic pattern of eschatological thought, and once again describes the nature of entities like the Son of Man, Christ, and the Church as especially related to the nature of God. We shall not here recapitulate the history of preexistence in the biblical traditions that has already been presented in the conclusion of each chapter. Rather, assuming that history we shall raise certain questions which seem to follow from the discussion and to be some sort of interest to the present day theological endeavor. So, I mean, he goes on, but this is not talking about pre-existent spirit children like us. He doesn't say people like you and I pre-existed. He's talking about Christ, the church, but like not the people itself in the church. He's talking about the Son of Man, wisdom, Torah. That's what he's referring to. This seems to be like a quote mine.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointing. And you know what that means?
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
You didn't try very hard.
No, I didn't. I admit I was not trying hard at all. So yeah, I don't think we see any evidence of the Mormon doctrine of pre-existence in there.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem to be
it's not in
going on
Romans.
there.
It's not in Romans.
No. Am I still?
Yeah, just again, just to reiterate IP's point here. As far as the specific doctrine is concerned, it's not scriptural, it's not biblical, it's not exegetical, and on top of that, it's not found within church history or church tradition. It's solely unique to Joseph, similar with the doctrine of God the Father once having a body of flesh and bones as tangible as any man. Again, specific only to Joseph and his perverted views of Scripture. It's as simple as that. It's sad, that he's an obvious, at least from prima facie, an obvious false prophet, since he's such a deviation from everything that came before him. And the fact that so many people, sadly, are actually, what's the word for it? That are deceived by that. It's really, really sad that they're deceived by that. I mean, I would hope that people would have more level, they'd have a greater level of critical thinking than to be deceived by a convicted con man who was essentially, apart from being clearly a pervasive speaker, a persuasive speaker. There was nothing to the guy. There was no substance to him at all. And for people to be, gullible enough to be deceived by such a, I would say, by and large, an unintelligent individual is quite disappointing. But anyway, that's sadly where it is. But anyway, let's continue on with the video, and I'll make further remarks as it goes along.
Oh, I forgot to remove that. Okay, let me get this. Hold on, I messed up. Sometimes the StreamYard thing gets a little weird. There we go. I got it there. Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's play a little bit more of this.
If anything, Cameron should be concerned that his own concept of creation ex nihilo didn't come about until 200 years after Jesus' death. So Cameron is just outright wrong.
So I mean the idea that was not developed out of thin air. Like the idea was based on what they were reading in the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like that's not the same thing. We don't see ideas like Romans 8:28 that we could support like pre-existence of spirit babies or something like that, whatever they want to call it. But that's not a good comparison. That's a false
analogy,
it
isn't.
These are not made up doctrines unknown to canonical Jews and Christians. However,
well, the problem is they are made up doctrines because they have no biblical or historical support as far as Joseph Smith is concerned when it comes to those doctrines specifically, as well as others. I mean, we're honing in on two here. If we're talking about just pure theological stuff, Joseph's theology, sadly, is just completely made up. It's completely perversive. It's lacking in any substance or any real biblical critical thought. The guy didn't know Greek. He didn't know Hebrew. The fact that people were convinced by that, of all people, is extremely disappointing. It's extremely disappointing. It sort of reminds me of what Dawkins said, which is that, if you go back to the time of Muhammad, it would have been easier to con people. But during Joseph's time, you're talking about the 19th century, you would have thought people would have been educated enough to see past what is essentially nothing more than a fiction author. That's what he was. I mean, he was just a fiction author that had these ideas. Obviously, he was good at convincing people. He was manipulative in that sense. But as far as actual substance is concerned, there's no substance there. And I think partly that has to do with the fact that let's say the higher grade stuff within theology, within Christian doctrine, which had been well established by that point, Joseph just couldn't understand it. So he has to dumb things down to a level that he can understand and then convince people of that understanding. The part he was good at was the convincing part, but the actual, the doctrines themselves are just, they're just completely silly and nonsensical. No intelligent exegesis, nothing insightful or enlightening in anything that he says. And then that's what people were persuaded by during his time, which is really, really sad given the fact that education had progressed so much by his point. It's not what it is today, but compared to the time of Muhammad, when we can kind of make a reason or an excuse as to how people may have been, how people may have been convinced by a con man at that time, you can make less of a case as to why people were dull enough to be convinced by a con man of the early 19th century. But that's seemingly what happened.
He's not wrong when he points out that Joseph Smith likely didn't get these ideas from Christians of his day. But this is a point in favor of Joseph Smith. How exactly did he produce scripture that aligned with biblical traditions unknown to him if he was simply a fraudster? In fact, the Book of Abraham contains many historical details that Joseph Smith got right that Cameron never even mentions.
Here we go.
I would say he was trying to hide them from his audience, but I'm not sure he even knows about them. This is not the way to analyze the truth claims of any religion or academic topic. It's also a really bad look for Cameron, because one of the main points in his video is that the church is trying to hide information about the Book of Abraham. He even put it on the thumbnail. That guy looks familiar.
It's funny.
Anyway, here are...
I think just to be credit to Cameron, I know it's hard to make thumbnails you want people to click. Never judge a book by its cover. Never judge a video by its thumbnail. We all do it.
5 things Cameron Bertuzzi doesn't want you to know about the Book of Abraham.
First of all, favorite part of the video right there. Love that. Love that part. Excellent. Excellent work. Excellent work, sir. Tip my invisible hat to you.
First, Joseph Smith predicted the existence of a plane called Ulashem. Later, a record of King Naran's sin was discovered that dated to a little before the time of Abraham.
By the way, there's no scholar that that corroborates that claim. There's no non-LDS scholar. This is the point I consistently try to get through to the LDS folk. And this is an example of a biased source, right? If you're talking about historical data, geographical data, archaeological data, whatever it may be, okay? If it is objectively true, there'll be consistency within academia as far as their consensus on it. So, for example, I just use this example as something plain, but if we take the historical record of the crucifixion of Christ, that's viewed consistently within academia as historical fact, okay, based on the historical data. So they regard it as something objectively true, right? There's widespread unanimous agreement among pretty much every single scholar within academia that Christ was crucified on a historical basis, okay? So when it comes to stuff in the Book of Mormon that's unique to Joseph and Joseph's understanding and Joseph's narrative, what we regard as a fictional narrative, because we don't regard anything Joseph said as true or authentic, because we regard him, as fraudulent given the data. The reality of it is that this would be the persuasive argument from a Mormon perspective, okay? If scholars were sitting there agreeing with Joseph that, yes, Joseph is doing stuff here that's quite incredible. He's recalling information, historically speaking, that he shouldn't have had an awareness to, okay? No non-LDS scholars making that argument about Joseph based on the data, okay? The consistency within academia, as far as the view on that, is that the only part Joseph gets right is when he's ripping from other sources that he has available to him. That's it. But that's not originality. That's just you take, like, even the Quran takes bits of information from other sources that is historically correct. That doesn't now mean the Quran is from God. The Quran is clearly not from God. The point that would verify the Quran as a authentic kind of revelatory source is if its uniqueness can demonstrate something prophetic. And that's the problem with the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham and all the standard works of the LDS Church. It's the uniqueness parts, the parts that are unique to Joseph, okay? And there aren't many, by the way. But the parts that are unique to Joseph are the ones which are regarded, by and large, as widely fraudulent, okay? Because they don't align at all with the data we have available to us today. That's why the consensus within scholarship is that it's disregarded. For example, the Book of Abraham as a translation, when Joseph's methodologies are scrutinized and looked at, as well as the what's called the papyri and the facsimiles that he had available to him, that are then later looked by actual experts in the field, the unanimous consensus by every single non-LDS scholar is that it's fraudulent. And that's the issue, okay? And that's the consistent pattern we see in regards to the Book of Abraham and the Book of Mormon and anything that Joseph produced, okay? And this is something I think LDS people have to think about. Do you make money talking about us? Actually, I don't make any money from this. I do this freely. But anyway, it's a strange question to ask. I actually have a full-time job, so that's where my income comes from. I'm not one of these people who sit at home and have to rely on donations for everything. You know, I actually work for a living. But anyway, separate issue. But yeah, that's the thing. So yeah, let's continue with the video and we can take it from there. And as I said, to anyone watching, the link is there. So if you want to come on and have a discussion, feel free to use the link and join and we can talk. We can chat.
And listed a place called Ulasum in Syria near Abraham's homeland. Now, in Semitic languages, O and U are sometimes exchanged, as well as the S and Sh sounds, making Olashem and Ulasum a perfect linguistic match. The correlation is so good that even non-LDS scholar Christopher Wood grudgingly admitted, certainly Ulasum could be superficially linked on phonetic grounds to the Olashem in the Book of Abraham. Olashem is an amazing match, geographically.
That's not what he says. You're about to see now what he actually says versus what, sadly, this guy is claiming that he said. And this is the kind of distortions that, you know, Mormon apologists have to come up with to try and affirm their side. But no, there's no scholar that affirms that. And you're about to see now when they pick holes in that argument here in a second.
Chronologically, and phonetically.
All right, sir. That's why you're here. Ulashem, Ulasum.
Well, yeah, conceivably on linguistic grounds, if that's your only grounds, you know, yeah, sure. But you would need more than that to make an identification.
Yeah.
You know, the problem.
So let me make the argument here, and David's going to make it in a second, right? But if you're talking about word association in such a sense that it affirms, let's say, something miraculous, where there's a clear piece of data that's being conveyed that the individual themselves otherwise could not have known, it's multifaceted. It requires more than one grounds for that to be demonstrated. So one example would be, if you take Nostradamus, I'm going to use this argument because this probably would make sense, okay? People know Nostradamus as the guy that made all these predictions, right? He made something like, I think, in other words, he made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of predictions, okay? There's only a handful of those predictions that some have suggested on. Now, this isn't accepted within academia, by the way. The consensus is that he was, you know, a fraud, essentially, when it comes to these predictions. But there's one or two where they sound akin to something that may have happened. But see, this is the thing, right? For something to be verifiable, it would require more affirmation than just one small minor similarity that it has to something. So if something has one minor similarity to something, that doesn't mean that it represents the whole of the thing it's claiming to be similar to. Okay, or as Mormon apologists are claiming that it's similar to. Okay, so for example, when Nostradamus says that something to the effect of this leader will rise up in the east and his name will be Hitler. Some people have taken that to mean, okay, see, Hitler is similar to Hitler, therefore that's what he's talking about. But you see, this is the thing. You would need more grounds. You'd need more data to be able to affirm that that's exactly, prophetically speaking, what's going on here. exact same metrics here. If you're talking about this, okay, if you have a linguistics bit of information that seems similar or could be conceived as something to a specific location, that's all well and good, okay? But you need more to affirm it than just that, okay? There'd have to be more data surrounding it. And the problem is that this specific passage that's being referred to, the surrounding data is actually inaccurate. So by those grounds alone, the claim is not warranted and not regarded as authentic. And that's why you don't have an LDS scholar that says that. The non-LDS scholar that he's referring to, even in the admission that he makes, points out the fact that this is certainly not the case, okay? There's not enough evidence here or data here to affirm this specific claim that they're trying to make. Okay, I'll answer this question. I'll pull this up. This is I want you to track with me here for a minute. Whoever put this comment in, okay? I want you to track with me and try and understand our line of reasoning here, okay? So I'm just trying to think of a way to make this argumentation to you that you can understand it. If you think of Islam, okay, this is the analogy I like to use, okay? On a historical basis, Muslims believe, okay, that Jesus was not crucified, okay? Any Muslim scholar you go up to, even if it's a reputable scholar from a reputable university, okay, they will argue on a historical basis that, yes, it can be demonstrated that Jesus was not crucified, okay? They will hold to that view regardless of the evidence. They will not make the admission, okay, that Jesus was not crucified, or sorry, was crucified based on the evidence, okay? And there's even been so-called scholarly works by Muslim authors that have been written defending the Quranic position on the crucifixion, okay? The reason it's not regarded within academia is because those sources, for all the right reasons, are regarded as bias, okay? And the reason they're regarded as bias is because if the data that they were putting out could be affirmed based on the data that we have available to us, the evidence that we have available to us, scholarship wouldn't be arguing at all against it. Scholarship would be agreeing with it, okay? There'd be a consensus. The thing is, and this is something you as LDS people have to consider, why, based on the evidence, is it only LDS scholars that come to those conclusions? Similar to from the Muslim side, why is it only Muslim scholars that come to the conclusion that Jesus wasn't crucified based on the evidence, okay? Every single non-Muslim scholar, every single non-LDS scholar is in complete 180, let's say, degree disagreement against what these scholars are saying. So that's why they're disregarded. They're disregarded because their arguments within academia have zero weight. If they had weight, you would have people agreeing with them on some level, but there's no non-LDS scholar that agrees with them. They're all disregarded viewpoints by scholars by and large. Let's just say that's the unanimous position. And that would be that's the red flag I think that you guys have to think about. You see, this is the problem, Lex, okay? You're saying that, but you have to demonstrate that with proof, okay? If you say learn LDS theology from Jacob Hansen and from Mormon sources, that's called circular reasoning, Lex. If something is historically verifiable based on evidence, I don't even need to go to LDS sources. Even non-LDS sources will be in agreement with the LDS sources, okay? Think of it from the perspective of the crucifixion of Jesus. Christians and non-Christians, atheists, agnostics, all the credible scholars you can think of are all in agreement on the same fact, okay, that he was crucified, okay? There's a consensus there, okay? When it comes to your position, if you have to rely solely upon LDS sources to affirm your position, and you're not going to regard at all what the non-LDS, and it's not that they're anti-Mormon, it's that they're led by evidence. It's an evidence-based approach, okay? They look at the data set that they have available to them in front of them, okay? And if they are of the opinion based on that evidence, okay, that the LDS church is false, okay, then you have to wrestle with the fact, why are they all coming to the same conclusion? They're not doing it to be anti-Mormon. They're just doing it because this is the best conclusion they can come to based on the data they have in front of them, okay? And the only people that see that data differently are Mormons. And that's what we call bias. That's called confirmation bias, Lex, okay? And if you could put aside the confirmation bias, step back, look at the data, look at the evidence objectively, you'd have no reason to be a Mormon. You'd see how dumb the arguments are. You'd see how dumb Joseph's argument is. Okay, and you'd have no reason to go along with the guy. But again, I can't do this for you. Yeah, exactly. Like that is the unanimous view within scholarship, and that's not based on an anti-Mormon perspective. Okay, that's not based on an anti-Mormon perspective. Like, that's based on, this is the data we have in front of us. This is the conclusion we're coming to based on that data. Okay, that's why, for example, when it comes to the Book of Abraham, every single non-LDS scholar, the likes of Robert Rittner, Klaus Baer, all those guys, when they looked at, and then even in this video, we have another Egyptologist in the form of David Falk. When all of these guys look at the Book of Abraham, they come to the same conclusion, that it's a fraudulent translation. If it was authentic, as it claims to be, they would have enough convicting evidence in front of them to say, yeah, Joseph did something we can't explain, and they would acknowledge it. Okay, but their inability to do that is not based on a what would you call it? A preconceived anti-Mormon disposition. It has nothing to do with that. It simply has to do with, this is the data, this is the evidence, it doesn't line up. That's what it has to do, and that's how the scholarly approach is carried out. And I think that you guys as Mormons have to really, really wrestle with that fact and say, okay, if they're all in disagreement with our scholars, okay, and their scholarly works, why is that? Anyway, we'll continue with the video for now.
Is when we look here at, say, if you pull up that portion of the Book of Abraham,
Right here, yep.
you know, even the verse 10 here, even the thank offering of a child did the priest of Pharaoh offer up upon an altar stood by the hill called Potiphar's Hill at the head of the plain of Olishem. Okay. There's no Potiphar's Hill in Mesopotamia. That's just because Potiphar is an Egyptian word. It's Poti-Re.
That's the first point, okay? Potiphar's Hill, right, in Mesopotamia doesn't exist. You're talking about a specific Egyptian name, okay? So there's your first clue. This is the wider surrounding context, okay? This is one extract from the Book of Abraham, and he's already pointing out a geographical error, okay, with the text. Now, that doesn't even get into the linguistic stuff and the other stuff, okay? But even the fictional material that's in here, because it's not a translation. It's certainly not a translation. All it is it's just a narrative that Joseph had concocted and then used the guise of a translation to convince people that this was something special from God, okay? That's all it is in a nutshell. Right? He just created a story to suggest there was a translation going on, to further further kind of the strength of his argument, which was that he was prophetic, or he was claiming to be prophetic. But as far as what we actually have, even in this fictional narrative, Lord knows where he got it from. Even this specific information here and data here is being proven to be geographically incorrect. But anyway, we'll continue on with the video.
Okay. That's a New Kingdom name.
Mm-hmm.
So it would by itself be an anachronism. That alone is an anachronism. So we got an anachronism here pointing to some place inconceivably Mesopotamia. And even here, Pharaoh is apparently performing a child sacrifice.
Ladies and gentlemen, in Mesopotamia. Okay.
In Mesopotamia. So the king of Egypt, who is not called Pharaoh at the time of Abraham, and again, these are Abraham's words.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's not like with the.
That's the other thing as well, right? The other thing is that the Book of Abraham claims to be a faithful representation of Abraham's exact words. Okay, translated. Abraham would have never said Pharaoh because that word didn't exist at his time. the word was king. It was king of Egypt. And then, as they also pointed out, the king of Egypt was not going into Mesopotamia performing child sacrifice. That is the consistent Egyptology perspective. Again, it's just Mormons that argue otherwise, right? Again, this is confirmation bias, okay? If you can look past this whole idea of I need to look for sources, again, from a Mormon perspective, it has to be LDS sources because they affirm exactly what I'm looking for. Again, confirmation bias, circular reasoning. If you can look past that and actually engage with, okay, what is it consistently that the scholarly sources are saying on this? And then you see the red flags, you'll see immediately, okay, this is false. This is a false created anachronism that's contradictory to the data. And if you understood the weight of that, then you would have you would see the fraudulent nature of what's going on here, and then you'd have one more reason to leave, right? But anyway, I'll leave it there and we'll continue on with the video.
The Bible, where they have like an updated place name or something.
No, it's not like a
Right.
retrojection. This cannot be a retrojection because we're told these are Abraham's words.
Right.
Okay, so you've got anachronism 1, that Pharaoh. Right beside a second anachronism, which is child sacrifice. The Egyptians did not do child sacrifices.
Yeah.
Then you got a place with a supposedly Egyptian name in Mesopotamia that has a new kingdom name. That's also an anachronism. It's also a geographical anachronism. And we're supposed to then say that Olishem is a perfect match with Eulishem. That's sort of like a broken clock telling time twice a day.
That's an analogy I was going to use, and also, I mean,
Yeah.
like I did a stream with Stephen Boyce back in January where we tried to argue, you know, we were doing a parody. We were arguing the Civil War imitates Homer. We found tons of matches between Homer and the Civil War just by looking. Again, as you said, you can when you have so many toponyms in the ancient world, you're gonna have something that's gonna match.
Eventually, yeah. Just statistical probability will get you that.
And I looked up this quote that he
But
gave.
even
from-
that next verse there in 11. Now the priest had offered up upon this altar 3 virgins at one time.
That's something.
Egyptians never did this.
Mm, yeah. What about these gods over here in verse 17? Anything there? Like anything?
What is this
is-
god of?
Yeah, it's a weird. It's weird. I don't know what are they saying that it is the name of the god or is it the
Well,
god of a
Elkanah
person?
is not a place name.
No, it's a person. He was the
It's a
father
person
of
name.
Samuel.
Yeah, Father Samuel. So I don't even know how that's supposed to apply to Abraham at all. Libna's a place name.
Yeah.
But dang.
Well, I looked up that quote that he had mentioned from Chris Wood. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was trying to track that down. Here's it more in context. So certainly Ulashim could be superficially linked on phonetic grounds to Olashem mentioned in the Book of Abraham. However, he goes on to say, but a convincing identification would have to be based on much more substantial evidence. And that's
Yeah.
the practice of Egyptian religion at Ur of the Chaldeans
Yeah.
in Joseph Smith Egyptian Papyri, complete edition from 2012, second edition 2013.
Yeah.
It's kind of
so-
it's kind of the same as say
I just quickly pause it there. This is the point, the overarching point, okay? When non-LDS scholars look at the Book of Abraham, the Book of Mormon, anything in relation to Joseph, these are the conclusions they come to. There's no convincing ground to sit here and affirm this stuff. The convincing ground that we stand upon based on the data we have available to us is that it's fraudulent and that he's just a con man, okay? And not a very good one at that. Well, if you look at the data, it would seem that he's good since he's conned so many people. But what I mean by that is if you just base things on evidence, okay, he doesn't give a good evidence-based argument for his false narrative, his fictional narrative that he's created. But sadly, people weren't looking to that at his time or even today, because a lot of the time it's either they're indoctrinated into the religion or they just don't check the sources. Because if you check the sources, no way on earth would you sit there and affirm this guy based on evidence. Because again, that's the consensus.
genealogy. And when you do a personal genealogy, it's not enough to just be able to connect names. You have to connect names to places because people have the same names.
And feel free to use the link, guys. It's there if you want to join the stream.
And the same works with topography, toponymy, where it's just not enough to have a place name because people do reuse place names. You have to be able to connect it to a certain time, people, cultural context, and all that. And the Book of Abraham, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's gone into crazy town.
In like, it's not like when we look at Exodus and their toponyms. They get Ramesses, Sukkoth, Baal-Zephon, Pithom. I mean, it's just like they're getting them all right every single time. And this is just not what we get with the Book of Abraham. It's just like, we got one. Guys, we got one. It's okay. It's like, but look at the surrounding context. You guys are getting a lot of misses too. I mean, like, yeah, you hit the dart once, but look at all the times you missed. I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. So come on.
Yeah. So, you say, like, you just brought up Exodus. Okay. You get the itinerary of the Exodus. Okay. You go from Ramses to Sukkot. Okay. That checks out. That's Cheku. To Pithom, Paratum, that checks out. To Baal-Zephon and Pi-Hahiroth, that also checks out in the Egyptian texts, and Migdol and the Yam Suf, all of that checks out geographically according to extra biblical sources, and it's all related in time and space. It's all 19th dynasty.
This was the thing I was trying to get Mormons to understand, okay? When it comes to the book of Exodus, okay, from an Egyptology standpoint, okay, you have people like Peter Feynman, okay? You have people like Bob Breyer, okay, who, as credible Egyptologists within the field have done an internal critique on the book of Exodus, okay? And they are in agreement that there's clear indications and affirmations within the text that point to a coherent, plausible historical narrative, okay? Because of the things that are correct, because of the things that are lining up with the data they have available to them, okay? This is the standard procedure within academia, okay? You can do an external critique and you can do an internal critique, okay? Now, the problem with the Book of Abraham, Book of Mormon, okay, is that when they do the same internal critique, this is what ends up happening. It ends up just being laughably bad in terms of not lining up with anything, being anachronistic through and through, and just getting almost essentially everything wrong, right? Like, this is the thing. It's like if people had thought critically about this during Joseph's time, Joseph would have been laughed at and he would have been exposed for what he was, okay? Again, as I kind of argued at the start of the stream, if you can just think critically, you wouldn't have fallen for such an unintelligent, uninspired individual. Okay, it's as simple as that. But sadly, people are indoctrinated to a point where they have to engage in the worst forms of confirmation bias, without any form of critical thought as to why is it that no LDS person agrees, no LDS scholar agrees with what our scholars are saying, with what our church is saying? Why is it that we have to be solely circular to affirm our church? Well, produce it. Give us the non-LDS scholars that have affirmed the Book of Abraham and the Book of Mormon. Don't just say there's a lot of critical research on the text. Give us the non-LDS scholars that have. I want quotations from you, Brendan, where they say, okay, yes, this demonstrates that the Book of Abraham is an accurate, an accurate translation. When it comes to the Book of Mormon, this is a authentic ancient historical record. Give us in quotations the non-LDS scholars who have said that in their respective works from a critical research standpoint, okay? Because this is the Mormon church. You guys claim stuff, but when we ask you for evidence, you produce nothing. I know, okay, Brendan, with all due respect, and you know that your only basis for research is what your church has told you and what your LDS scholars have told you. No, you made the claim. I already gave names, Brendan. I gave the names of Robert Rittner, okay? I gave you Klaus Baer, okay? In this video, we have David Falk, okay? You also have another guy as well, John A. Wilson as well. There's a number of scholars that have all commentated on this, okay? And your claim, sadly, based on the scholarly data that we have available to us, is verifiably, as one triune truth says, is verifiably false. You're making the claim. I just gave you the scholarship. Now you retaliate with scholarship from non-LDS scholars that affirm your position with full citations. They don't exist, Brendan. I've checked. Okay. The consensus within academia is that your religion and your church is fraudulent based on the data, that Joseph Smith is a con man based on the data. Okay? There's no getting away with that. Okay? Unless you can prove otherwise from the non-LDS position, because I know, Brendan, and you know, that your only affirmation for your religion is your religion itself. It's circular. You have to go to your church and your LDS scholars to affirm your position. That's the consensus within academia. I don't have to prove anything. Okay, the guy was already what's it called? We have even a copy of one of his trial bills from when he went on trial. But the fact that he produces, let's stick with the Book of Abraham. Okay, this is how we know he's a con man. One example among many examples, Brendan. Okay, Joseph produces a clearly false translation and labels it as an accurate, divinely inspired translation, where there was a form of divine channeling through him that produced the Book of Abraham. Okay. No non-LDS scholars in agreement on that. The consensus within academia is that it is a fraudulent translation produced by a clear fraudulent individual. Who has said that? Robert Rittner has said that. Klaus Baer has said that. John A. Wilson has said that, okay? Just to name a few. This is the consensus within academia, unless you can demonstrate otherwise, Brendan. He was convicted. We have his trial bill. And he was actually fined, by the way. He actually did receive a fine for that. But Brendan wanted a specific example. I gave him the example of the book of, what's called the Book of Abraham. Well, I have it right here. We're going to get up in a second, we'll get up the trial bill. But for the moment, Brendan, I just want you to ponder on that fact, okay? You're claiming that he's not a con man, okay? And Renaissance man, you're claiming he's not a con man as well. Produce the scholars that affirm the stuff that he claims is legit, because the consensus within academia is that it's not legit. You know what he means. Sorry, so what does he mean by translation, Brendan? Because in the actual book itself, he claims that these are the words of Abraham, that these are the accurate words of Abraham. That's fantastic behavior, by the way, Brendan. He was convicted of punching a tax collector. You actually answered your friend's question for me, so now I don't need to show anything. Even a Mormon's in agreement he was convicted. But anyway, that's besides the point. The thing I was referring to was when he was convicted for crystal ball gazing, but because he conned people out of money. But that's a separate thing. The Book of Abraham, you have to address that, Brendan. Okay? You have to address the fact, okay, that he produced a fraudulent translation, okay, and why it's labeled as such within academia, and why it's only your church that argues against the consensus there within academia. That's called bias, Brendan, okay? If it was objectively true, then even non-LDS scholars would be in agreement, Brendan. They'd be sitting there saying, yes, he translated it right. We don't know how he did it. But yes, his translation is accurate, and that's incredible, because at the time, no one could do that, and he does something that's, that's, as I said, not possible for his particular time period, since that language was a dead language. But the reality of it is when they looked at it, they came to the agreement that it was completely false. Anyway, we'll continue with the video for now.
So we got people, places, names, contexts, relative geography. It all checks out in Exodus. Here,
but here's the thing, Renaissance man. This is where you're sadly, what's the word? You're sadly deceived and being manipulated by your church and Joseph Smith. Okay, he produced facsimiles, Renaissance man. Okay, you're Joseph Smith, you're con man. He produced facsimiles, okay, which are in the Pearl of Great Price, okay, which others were able to look at. And by the way, there's still, even though parts of it were burned, the papyri were burned, there was still parts of the papyri that they were able to look at that he claimed to have translated. Okay, and they looked at all of it, all the stuff that they had available to them, from that to the facsimiles, and the conclusion they came to, Renaissance man, the non-LDS scholars, and I know you're going to hate to hear this, he didn't get a single thing right. Okay, that's the reality of it. Okay, and that creates for you a massive issue. Okay, because if his translation was accurate, they would have been sitting there agreeing with them. Okay, if he got things right, they'd be sitting there agreeing with them. But the conclusion they come to within all their works is that this is just an invention of Joseph. It's something that he created as part of his persona of being a con man. That's it. That's the consensus. Okay, now I implore of you, Renaissance man, check the data, right? If your only affirmation for your church is you have to go to LDS scholars and your church, that's called circular reasoning. Okay, because there should be, sources outside of your church that affirm it. Okay, and why is it that all the sources outside of your church are in agreement on a historical basis, on an Egyptology basis, on a archaeological basis, that it's completely false? Okay, these are the things you have to think about, man, and you have to really, really understand the implication of that.
You got the possible identification of one name, and everything else around it is wacko jacko.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read that like years ago, and I was like, "Why is Pharaoh in Mesopotamia? I don't know if that's right." Like,
why is he called Pharaoh at the time of Abraham?
Yeah, another problem. Another problem. Just keeps
why is he committing sacrifices in Mesopotamia? Child sacrifice, virgin sacrifices. None of this makes a whit of sense.
No.
What's Potiphar's Hill doing in Mesopotamia?
You're asking some good questions. And again, how many explanations do Mormons have to come up with to rescue this? Like, how ad hoc are they going to make it? I'm not saying they can't. I expect we'll get responses, and they're going to come up with things to explain this. Here's my challenge: how is what you're going to say not going to keep getting ad hoc? You're just coming up with more explanations to rescue this.
It's creating a cognitive load.
Yeah, and
this is the problem. Is Mormon apologists said, "Oh, we found one thing. You should be satisfied with that. We're done."
No.
Well, but by looking at the text carefully and being careful readers, and we would expect anybody to take the text like this, making certain truth claims and examine it carefully.
Mm-hmm.
That how much of a cognitive load are you going to build up here before the whole structure collapses on its own weight?
Right. Let's get back into this.
Second, the Book of Abraham calls the sun Shinha. Later, the pyramid texts show that Shinha is a plausible rendering for the word they used to describe the sun's orbit during Abraham's time.
Oh,
the
stop this.
Okay. Go ahead.
The sun's orbit.
That's what I said.
That's heliocentric anachronism.
Yeah.
The Egyptians did not have a word for orbit. That's Copernican. That's Copernican philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Egyptian. And this Shinha, what is that? I have no idea. I mean, they gave no source.
Right.
So you can't look that up. How are we to know if it's correct?
Good point.
We need more evidence. Okay, give us, okay, maybe there is a word that's, and here's what I found, for example. I heard a Mormon apologist, Bruce Porter, say this, that
Hold on, someone said something here. Let's see what they said. I think that's an unreasonable standard. Of course, the only people who are looking into ancient people who care about this topic in the first place. Why would you care? By the way, Renaissance Man, as I pointed out, I gave you some names. There's a plethora of non-LDS scholars that have looked at this, okay? This isn't just something that's engaged with specifically by the LDS Church. The reality of it is that when the non-LDS scholars look at it, they immediately, this is the thing, Renaissance Man, they immediately disregard the Book of Abraham after a very, very quick critical study of it, because they see very quickly that it's nothing more than an invention of Joseph, okay? That it's not an accurate translation, that it's completely false, okay? That's the conclusion they come to, and it's disregarded. So they don't need to do much engagement with it, apart from that initial critique, okay? It would be more interesting if Joseph was actually getting things right, okay, when he produced this translation, what he claims was a translation, even though we know otherwise, okay? And they were sitting there saying stuff like, oh, he got this thing over here correct, that's amazing. He got this over here correct, that's amazing. But no, the consensus is that he's completely false in the entirety of his translation, okay? And then that's why they reduce it down to nothing more than an invention of his, okay? That has nothing to do with actual translation. Because how do we know that? And how do they know that? And why do they come to that conclusion? Based on the data, based on the papyri that's left that we have available, based on the facsimiles, based on the fact that under the facsimiles, Joseph includes his translation methods. All of those have been critiqued. And every single non-LDS scholar is in agreement that it's fraudulent.
I think he said pairware, so he got the word wrong to begin with. But Pharaoh, house, great house. Okay. Well, he says that, house is, Joseph Smith translated that correctly because he talks about the blood of the great king. Well, house never means blood. It never means blood. But this is sometimes what Mormon apologists will do, is they will do these sort of, well, okay, you've got a house, it's got people in it, and they have blood, therefore it must mean blood. And that was Bruce Porter's explanation. Okay? So what is this word shinha that, frankly, is not readily apparent in the Egyptian text that supposedly means this anachronistic concept of orbit that didn't exist in the Bronze Age?
Yeah, it's pretty strange if you ask me, I have to say. Let's put this video back up and let's play his next section.
They used a different word just after Abraham's time, and it was the more commonly used word. Joseph Smith didn't just get the name right, he even got the chronology right.
Yeah, I mean, like, what words? Like, where does your source?
This claim is so vague, you can't fact check it.
There's nothing here.
So vague.
That's actually a funny argument. It's that, like, some of the LDS arguments are, they create these extremely vague arguments that you can't fact check, and then because you can't fact check them, therefore that's an affirmation for the Book of Abraham. Again, if that's not deceptive tactics, or if that's not a demonstration of how they know there's little to no argument they can make for the text, that they have to create these arguments, that kind of tells you everything you need to know.
There's nothing here.
I try really hard to get as many sources as I can in videos for this reason. I don't want someone to do this to me. Like, if this is a video to just make Mormons feel better, fine. But this is not going to be convincing to anyone who's not a Mormon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, this is so vague. Sorry.
Oh, no, continue.
Yeah, I mean, he references a word that...
And that's the other thing, right? This is the problem, and this is another red flag, okay? Your arguments from the LDS side are so bad, okay, that they could only sound convincing to someone who's literally engaging in the worst forms of confirmation bias, which are the members of your church, because they are desperately looking for anything they can find that for them gives them the sense that they can trust in what they have in front of them, in spite of the lack of evidence. Okay, and that's really sad. Okay, that shows you the level of this, deception at work there. And again, I'll keep reiterating this claim, because I'm hoping at one point anybody watching this really understands what's being said here. Again, if only your church and your scholars are coming to this conclusion, does that not tell you that the conclusion has to be subjective and biased by nature? If purely on an evidence-based approach, every single non-member of your church that looks, again, credible scholars I'm referring to here, non-member of your church that looks at this, those same sources are all coming unanimously to the same conclusions based on the evidence, which is that they're fraudulent. If you could just understand the implication of that, you'd leave your church immediately.
And he starts up with saying, well, this could mean orbit. Okay. There's nothing, you will never find the word orbit in any standard Egyptian lexicon. Period. Okay, you won't find that.
Right.
Because I have all the lexicons. Okay. Second of all,
Third.
Go ahead.
he doesn't reference what the original word was, this shinha. He says it could be read as shinha.
Hmm.
So he's making a reference to an Egyptian word, but not telling us what the original Egyptian word was. And then he says, this dates to Abraham.
This is the point, Internet Guy 2019. It's not that we sound like atheists, okay? It's that we're taking a critical evidence-based approach, okay? And the problem is that you can't, as a Mormon, engage with that. Therefore, you have to label it as something negative to try and make you feel better about the lack of evidence that you have to support your position, okay? That's what it is. You just don't want to engage with honest research, so you have to come up with tags and reasons and justifications to justify sitting there, being deceived and engaging in the worst forms of circular reasoning and confirmation bias, instead of actually doing what we're doing, which is, okay, let's do a critique of the sources. Let's see the data in front of us. Let's look at the evidence, and let's come to an intellectually, let's come to an intellectual conclusion, okay, where we're being honest with the data that we have. We're properly engaging with kind of an academic approach here, where we're trying to give it every fair chance it has to demonstrate its veracity. And then if by the end of that, we're all coming to the same conclusion, which is that it's not true, that's not just because we're atheistic in our mindset. It's because we're taking an evidence-based approach. Even the Bible actually tells you to do that. Okay, you have, for example, in one of John's epistles, if I'm not mistaken, where he says, test the spirits. Okay, you have warnings from Jesus about false prophets. Okay, in other words, be careful in terms of what you're listening to and what you're hearing. And he even talks about soothsayers. Soothsayers are people who make convincing arguments. Okay, but just because you can make a convincing argument doesn't mean that the argument itself is a good argument. It just means that you're effective in how you're arguing for something which otherwise may not be true. Okay, that's the argument I present against Joseph. I think he was probably good at arguing for what was realistically a very dumb narrative. Okay, and that's how he convinced a lot of people. These are not old interpretations, Renaissance man. These are the conclusions that we have and we've consistently held to today based on the best data we have in front of us, as found within scholarship, which is the scholarly conclusion on this. Okay, I know that you might not like that. Okay, but as I keep telling you, Renaissance man, why is it that only your church leaders and your scholars, when they look at the data, are coming to a conclusion that every other non-LDS person is not coming to? You don't see the red flag in that. You're not. You see, you're just not getting the point. Renaissance man, like, try and hear what I'm saying, and this is what I'm encouraging all of you LDS folk to do. Okay, again, I'll repeat the argument one more time. If it's only your church leaders, okay, and your church members and your scholars from your side, okay, that are coming to this conclusion based on the evidence, right? And then nobody outside of your church is coming to that same conclusion based on the evidence. Why is that? That's the thing you have to be critical with. That's not true, Flipshot. The conclusion is, okay, and we can read out the quotations in a moment, based on the data. I have Robert Rittner's work here with me, okay? I have an extract that we can go through, Okay, I have John A. Wilson as well. I also have Klaus Baer. And in quotations, the word they use is that it's an invention, an erroneous invention of Joseph. It's fraudulent. That's the conclusion, Flipshot. Okay. But you don't hear it, Renaissance man, because if you heard what I was saying, you'd sit back for a moment and say, you know what, that's a good point. Why is it that only my church leaders and my scholars from my side are coming to this conclusion, and every single non-LDS person, every single non-LDS scholar is coming to a completely, contradictory conclusion, right? And pretty much a damning conclusion. Why is that? And you can't see the red flag in it, Renaissance man. It's not that we're dismissing people that are sympathetic, Renaissance man, to your position. It's we're dismissing them on the basis of bias, okay? Because bias is simply this, Renaissance man. If it's only a small cohort that are coming to a conclusion based on the evidence, and then every single other person outside of that cohort, right, is unanimous that the conclusion here is that it's fraudulent, okay? You can't see the bias in that. Oh, here's the thing, Renaissance man. There's a ton. It doesn't matter when. By the way, just so you know, it doesn't matter when the works were produced, because even in this video, like you have David A. Falk here, for example. Okay, so here's one example of someone that's commentating on it as an Egyptologist. Okay, even he points out that even the works that were produced in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s on the Book of Abraham. Okay, he said they're just as valid today as they were then. So I know you want to create an argument to try and justify that, but you have a modern Egyptologist that's affirming that the position that they held to back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s about the Book of Abraham is the same position they hold to today. That's the argument, Renaissance man. It doesn't matter when the works were produced. They still believe that today. But in what sense has it progressed? Because David A. Falk here says that the conclusions they came to, the likes of Robert Rittner, okay, the likes of Klaus Baer, okay, they still hold up today. They still believe that. Egyptology believes that. And to prove my point, Renaissance man, give us one non-LDS scholar that affirms your translation. How is it a weak argument? If your claim is true, then the scholar should be in agreement. So I'm gonna give you a chance, Renaissance man. Produce the non-LDS scholars who believe the Book of Abraham is not, as all the other Egyptologists have claimed, which is a fraudulent translation by Joseph. And calling it a translation is being generous, by the way.
Time, okay, then presumably Middle Egyptian, and then says that later on a different word is used. And it doesn't tell us what it is. It's an argument completely devoid of specifics.
Yeah, we need a little bit more. For sure.
Third, the original manuscript for the Book of Abraham says a woman named Zepta discovered Egypt when it was underwater, which aligns with some Egyptian texts that say Isis discovered Egypt rising out of the water. But Isis and Zepta aren't the same, right? True, but some Egyptian texts name Isis as the daughter of Ptah. And in the time period Joseph Smith's papyri were written, Zepta would mean daughter of Ptah.
So, what are your thoughts on there?
Okay. First of all, he makes a reference to the original text of the Book of Abraham. I thought we didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was lost.
Yeah, we're talking.
How does he know that's in the original text?
So this is the problem, Renaissance man. I asked you for non-LDS scholars, and you gave LDS scholars, and you don't see the red flag. Only your LDS scholars are in agreement. Okay, every single non-LDS scholar, for example, Robert Rittner, you have David A. Falk in this video, you have John A. Wilson, you have Klaus Baer, just to name a few, okay, are all in agreement that Joseph's translation is fraudulent, right? If his translation was authentic and true, they'd look at it and they'd come to the same conclusion that your church is coming to. But here's the thing. I can admit there's overlap in evidence because they're basing that off evidence, Renaissance man. When they do a critique, a scholarly critique of the Book of Mormon, okay, and the Book of Abraham, they all come to the same conclusion. Every single non-LDS scholar comes to the same conclusion, okay? And you can't see the red flag in that it's only your church that affirms that position, okay, based on evidence. Every single non-member of your church affirms that your position is false and that it's fraudulent. Okay, and you can't see the issue with that. Okay, if you could step back for a moment and objectively think about it and say, okay, when it comes to my Book of Mormon and my Book of Abraham, okay, every single non-LDS person, every single non-LDS scholar who's an expert in their field, who knows the archaeology, who knows the Egyptology, okay, are all coming to the same conclusion that it's fraudulent based on the evidence. And it's only my church members that agree otherwise? Why is that? And you can't see the issue there. Like, that's the disturbing fact. What's it called? Internet Sky. We just dealt with this in this video. Okay, like, you know, we were looking at Peter Feynman. Okay, we were looking at what's his name, Bob Breyer, who has a whole lecture series on the Book of Exodus. Okay. Like, this is something within Egyptology that's what's it called, that has been demonstrated within both secular and non-secular works. Okay, that there is a historical narrative there that does line up with the data that they have. Okay, I just gave you a couple of examples. Okay, that same leeway, okay, that same affirmation is not there for the Book of Mormon, and it's not there for the Book of Abraham. And this is the argument I keep trying to make with you guys. I even gave the example of the crucifixion of Jesus. I mean, every secular scholar is in agreement that Jesus was crucified, okay? But every secular scholar is in agreement that your Book of Mormon and your Book of Abraham are fraudulent. And you can't see the issue there, internet guys. Again, you need to think critically, man. But again, this is the other thing, okay? When you talk about the crucifixion of Jesus, you're talking about something which is a metaphysical claim. Okay, academia doesn't address specifically, okay, given the approach that they take, metaphysical claims in that specific way. Okay, in terms of the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham, I'm talking about, and I gave you the example of the crucifixion of Jesus, I'm talking about historically verifiable stuff. Okay, that's why scholars will actually use, like, this is the thing, right? Scholars will use the Bible, okay, unanimously. Even secular scholars will use the Bible to affirm certain bits of information historically, geographically, you know, from an Egyptology perspective. Okay, they'll actually make use of it because they do regard it as an ancient historical record. Okay, whether you like it or not, that is the consensus within scholarship. When it comes to the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham, they're regarded as fraudulent, and no secular scholar uses them. They're just fraudulent. It's as simple as that. They're critiqued by scholars, and the conclusion is that they're fraudulent. Okay. But again, see, your claim doesn't work because you're trying to hide behind a metaphysical argument to hide the fact that on a purely physical, evidence-based argument, your book and your false prophet have no leg to stand upon. Okay, and that's the thing you can't see in what's being said here. Okay, if only you could grasp that point. Okay, let's continue with the video.
Right. And again, he said earlier in the stream that we're talking about a text from around 200 BC that had influence from Jewish interpretations. And it's like, now we're going back to the time of Abraham. Like, okay, now we're just, we're changing the narrative as it fits. It's just not working.
Yeah. And second of all, if he's, I saw this in your notes where you said that Zepta is supposedly from Siptah. Well, Satah, and you pointed this out, is not a woman's name.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a woman's name. It's son of Ta.
Yep.
If it was a daughter of Ta, it would be Sat Ta.
I'm glad you said that because I looked that up and I'm like, I think this means son of.
By the way, guys, the link is there. I've pinned it to the top, so you're free to join and come on, and we can have a discussion. So yeah, please do come on if you want to come on, and we can talk. We can talk through whatever.
of Ta, and like
It does mean son of Ta.
good,
Yeah,
good to know my
it's-
research worked out.
Yeah, your research worked out this time. Yeah. You know, it's like Sa Re, son of Re. Sa Ta, son of Ta. And the converse is Sat Re, daughter of Re, or Sat Ta.
Hmm.
Now, the thing is, Isis is never called Sat Ta. He's making an empty conjecture here.
Right.
He's making an empty conjecture that Sat, give the benefit of the doubt here, Sat Ta is a reference to Isis. And no such reference exists. This is just an empty conjecture. He's making a false equivalence here to try to make it work. It's again, it's massaging, it's including a unspoken premise in his argument, which is you got Sata Zata, and frankly, that Z anyway isn't Middle Kingdom. The Z character is Old Kingdom.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that's not good.
Okay, and we're going to find some of this in the Book of Abraham, where he uses phonetics that are not contemporary with Abraham.
Hmm.
And this is by far not even the most grievous one. I mean, this is probably a peccadillo. I mean, you could basically say, "Oh, well, that's the old rendering." Okay, fine. You know, that's, you know, but you then have.
Well, the thing is, we are Flipshot, and if you want to argue otherwise, you can use the link and come on. The link is there if you want to come on and defend it. But you're going to have to bring your sources. So it's as simple as that.
He has to then insert the missing premise that, okay, Satah is in the Book of Abraham. Satah refers to Isis, therefore Satah is Isis. It's a missing premise. That middle premise isn't there. It's a statement of fact.
Actually, I'm going to point out something funny here. Okay, Renaissance man, it's actually the other way around. Your people would have killed Galileo for saying the Earth was round. Why? Because Galileo's approach was purely scientific and evidence-based. Okay, it's actually you have it in reverse. Okay, if we demand, good substantial evidence, okay, evidence which can be substantiated. Okay, remember the claim that the Earth was flat, okay, was a purely religious argument for that time. Okay, it was a religious-based argument. Okay, and this argument of the Earth being in the center and everything circling, orbiting around the Earth. Again, that was a religious argument. Okay, so if you're talking about control over people's thoughts and how they understood their environment, okay, again, it was. Oh, we have Flipshot is joining. Boom. Hold on now. Are you there, man?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little muffled.
Okay, I'll try to talk louder.
Probably not louder, but I'm just saying it's not the volume. It's just it's like you have something over your mouth while you're talking. But I can kind of make out what you're saying. But if I struggle with anything, I'll ask you to repeat.
Okay.
So what's you're Mormon, right?
Yes, I am.
So, okay, let me what's it called? Let me give the argument back to you, and let me get your impression of it. So, do you see an issue with the fact that if you talk about someone coming to a conclusion, okay, that it's only your church leaders and the LDS scholars that come to this conclusion, okay? And this is, again, if we're talking about a scholarly-based approach, we're talking about an evidence-based approach based on the data we have in front of us, right?
Which claim are we talking about? What specific claim are the LDS church scholars making that nobody else is making? Can you be a little bit more specific on that?
Yeah, so if we limit it to the Book of Abraham at the moment, okay? They claim
Sure.
that this is a translation of these ancient Egyptian papyri that encoded within are the words of Abraham. Okay, and that's what's on the papyri. Okay, the actual words of Abraham. Okay, the issue is
Right.
the issue is that when they have analyzed what Joseph translated based on the papyri that they have available to them, based on the
That's
facsimiles.
impossible for them to do that, because Joseph Smith had dozens of more scrolls than what we have existing today.
Yeah, but
We
they
have a few small
have
fragments,
yeah, but they still
but
have
they don't have any of the long scroll.
they do.
With
They
which
have
the-
fragments. They have fragments of what he translated first and foremost, and they've spoken about this in their works, by the way. Okay, so that's true. Okay, this has been commentated on by the Egyptologists themselves. Okay, and they translated
But
all
that's-
of what he. Hold on, they translated all of those fragments, and then on top of that,
Yes,
the other issue,
the fragments that we have.
Okay, the other issue that you have then is that in the Pearl of Great Price, you have facsimiles of what Joseph translated, under which you have his methodology. Okay,
Correct.
he includes his translation methodology. The point here is that when every single non-LDS scholar looked at what he claimed to have translated, okay, and they looked at his translation methods, the conclusion is it's fraudulent. Okay,
For the
that should be a
facsimiles.
the facsimiles and even the papyri that they looked at.
Right. The papyri that they've looked at contains the Book of Breathings, and LDS
Yeah, and they also
scholars
looked.
and
Hold
everybody
on,
else
but that's but
agree
no,
on that.
no, because the non-LDS scholars are in agreement that part of what they translated would have been original to what Joseph translated, because not all of the fragments were destroyed. Okay, you do understand that the parts of the fragments did remain, okay, and that they were burned up, but parts of them remained. Okay,
there's a few small fragments, one of which
yeah,
contains the first facsimile.
yeah, and the point is that every single thing that's there, meaning some of it is original to what Joseph translated, he got nothing right.
Yeah, but the
That's their
claim
conclusion.
isn't that he was translating that portion. That's not the claim of the church.
Yeah, but your
The
church.
claim
What
of
do you
the-
mean? Your church is that he. 1 second. The claim of your church is that this is a translation, and he even calls it a translation, and he includes his
Right,
translation.
but we
method.
don't have the part. We don't have the fragments of the scroll that he translated from.
We
He
have
translated
parts. Hold
from-
on. We
No,
have
there were-
parts of it.
There were
Flip shot.
several scrolls
shot.
that he had.
That's not.
The long scroll
Wait,
is
okay,
what we
flip
don't
shot,
have any
Flip
parts
shot.
of.
Flip shot.
Yeah.
Which non-LDS scholar argues that?
What?
What you just
Non-LDS
argued.
scholar.
Yeah.
That we don't have all of this fragments.
No,
we don't have all the
no,
scrolls that Joseph
Hold
Smith
on.
had.
That's not the thing. What I'm asking is
Okay.
which non-LDS scholar argues that they can't determine from the papyri that they have in front of them, as well as the facsimiles that Joseph himself produced, right, with his translation methods, that they can't determine from that whether the translation is authentic or not. Which non-LDS scholar says that?
I don't have any names, and
They
I'm not
don't
sure.
exist. Flip
Right,
shot, they
yeah,
don't exist.
I'm sure they don't, because there's
Yeah.
LDS scholars that would say the exact same thing. That
Yeah, but
what
that's
is on the
circular
fragments that we
reasoning
have.
part, Flip shot.
What
Flip
the-
shot, that's the circular reasoning part you're not getting.
That LDS scholars say the exact same thing?
No,
The
your
LDS
LDS scholars defend this translation and they defend the facsimiles.
But we don't have any of the long scroll that he translated from.
We have parts of what he translated, and we
No,
have the
we
facsimiles.
don't.
We have enough. Have you even read their arguments? Okay. Have you
Yes.
not read? So you read Robert Rittner's work on this. You read Klaus Baer's work on this. You've read John A. Wilson's work on this.
I haven't read them all.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry, I haven't read all
need to
of them.
read. Yeah. Well, you need to read
Okay.
them to understand the argument here. Okay. Because
Okay.
they have looked
Well, what
at
is
all
the
the
argument?
material that's there. And by the way, you do know. I don't know if you're aware of this. Okay. This was spoken about within this video. Okay. One of your
Yeah,
early church
I've
leaders
been here the whole
after
time.
Joseph. 1 second. One of your early church leaders after Joseph, right? After you had the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, and then that dead language becomes translatable. He actually
Right.
gave a number of Egyptologists, right, the material that Joseph translated to translate themselves to see if he got it right, and they were all concluding that he got it wrong. Okay, it's spoken about at the start, and I recommend you watch this video because it's very good. They go through the
Yeah, but
sources.
that's not how it happened.
But
the church was
they
given these.
cite the sources, Flipshot. You haven't even looked at the sources. Watch this video, okay? And then look at the works, okay? That, as I said, Robert Rittner, Klaus Baer, John A. Wilson have produced, and why they all come to the conclusion that his translation is completely fraudulent.
LDS scholars agree that the fragments that we have do not contain the text of the Book of Abraham. I don't.
No,
That's
they
the problem.
defend. Hold on, you haven't even read. Okay, what do they say about the facsimile? Do they defend it and claim that his facsimile and his translation methods are correct, or do they claim that his facsimile and his translation methods are incorrect?
So the claim of the church is
I'm not asking
that
the church. I'm asking about your scholars, and give us the citation. I'm asking you for evidence, man. Where's your citation?
Claim of the church. The claim of the church.
Hold on. Based on what citation? What citation?
Okay. Well,
don't tell me the claim of the church. That's your claim of what the church claims.
Okay,
but
my claim that I'll say it's my claim then.
You see the issue, Flipshot. Don't tell me your church claims, and then you can't even give me the source where they claim this.
I don't have any.
I actually have some of their claims.
Okay.
By the way,
that's
I actually
fine.
have some of their claims here. Okay, and they're not arguing what you're arguing. Okay, and now if you want to argue otherwise, you have to produce your sources.
Okay, I don't have any sources in front of me.
So you see the problem with the argument you're trying to make?
No, I don't.
Is it a good argument if you can't even produce sources to defend it?
I would have to look them all up.
Well, but if you're going to bring to me an argument, okay, and that you claim that this is an argument that your church affirms, and then you can't even give me the affirmation in source form.
My issue is that you're not engaging with the actual claim of the church, because the church is not claiming
you're saying that based on what source? Based on what source, Flipshot? Are they not claiming that?
They're not claiming.
Based on what source?
That
based on what source? Flipshot, what source? What source are you giving me to demonstrate that they don't claim that?
I would have to look it up.
Well, why should I take it seriously then? Because I actually have claims that demonstrate otherwise.
That the church is claiming that the fragments that we have contain the text of the Book of Abraham?
No, I have claims where your church has affirmed the fact that this is in fact an authentic translation, okay? And the problem with that is that when
an authentic translation of what?
The words of Abraham, which were contained on this Egyptian papyri, by the way, which by themselves, it doesn't even line up. It doesn't even line up. What's it called chronologically? Anyway, that's another argument that scholars use against your papyri, by the way. Okay, which is another issue that you have, which you haven't even looked at. If you'd read the works, you'd see that that's a further argument. Okay, and this is part of this is what I'm trying to get across to you. Okay, you need to in your time. Okay, you need to look at think of it from my perspective, okay, from a moment, okay? If you're going to convince me of an argument, okay, your argument should have affirmation outside of your church, because if it doesn't have a level of affirmation outside of your church, then that tells me very clearly that's a purely circular-based argument.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree.
And this is the red flag for me and every other non-LDS person, is that every single non-LDS person who's looked at your sources is in agreement they're fraudulent, and they've written about it copiously.
And all the LDS scholars have agreed.
That's called circular reasoning. Yeah, that's called circular reasoning, Flipshot.
No, the LDS
That's called
scholars,
confirmation bias, Flipshot.
They agree with I'm saying that they agree with these non-LDS scholars that the text of the Book of Abraham is not contained in the extant fragments.
That's not their claim. Okay, that's not their claim. That's not what the non-LDS side is saying. Okay, parts of the Book of Abraham are contained within the fragments, by the way. Okay, and they know that, and all of the fragments were translated, so at least a percentage of what was translated is representative of what Joseph translated, and he doesn't even get that right, by the way. Okay, and then on top of that, hold on, Flipshot. Yeah, and those few pieces, he doesn't even get that right. Joseph doesn't even get those minute pieces correct. He even gets those wrong. And then on top of that, you have the facsimiles, which Joseph himself produced, and then under which he has translation methods included, they've looked at that and they've agreed. Again, this is the agreement within scholarship. It's completely fraudulent.
And the understanding of the church is that this is
But based on
Abraham's
what citations?
interpretation of these.
Abraham's interpretation?
Yes.
Well, what are you talking about? Abraham's interpretation?
From the book of Abraham. He's interpreting this.
I think you mean Joseph's interpretation.
No, Abraham. The church's position is that Abraham's interpretation of these papyri, of the facsimiles.
I think you mean Joseph Smith. I don't think you mean Abraham.
No, I mean Abraham.
But the facsimiles were produced by Joseph.
Obviously, we have an ancient papyri with these facsimiles on it, right? We have one copy of an ancient papyri with one of the facsimiles on it. So you're saying Joseph created these papyri?
We're not talking about the papyri. We're not talking about the papyri. You're not hearing the argument, Flipshot. Okay? The argument is that there's enough material that was preserved, right, even after, though the material you're referring to was destroyed, that can be translated and has been translated, okay? Meaning that at least a percentage of that material is original to what Joseph translated. The argument is that, hold on.
Joseph didn't translate everything that was in his possession.
We're not arguing that he translated, hold on, Flipshot, we're not arguing that he translated everything. We're arguing that some of it is what he translated, okay? And the problem is that
the church's claim is that is not correct.
But Flipshot, the problem is that even the sum of it, he doesn't even get right. Okay, and then furthermore, the facsimiles which he produced, under which he contains his methods, were, as I said, within scholarship, are completely disregarded as completely fraudulent. Okay, and it's only your church leaders and your church scholars that defend it. That's circular reasoning. That's bias. That's confirmation bias. Why should I believe that?
You should. What you're saying? Why should you believe?
Yeah, from an evidence-based perspective.
And so we're just talking strictly about the facsimiles themselves, not about the text of the Book of Abraham.
Yeah, and even the text.
You're conflating everything together. You're conflating everything together, which is not accurate.
Hold on. How do you know that? Based on what sources?
Based on the sources that he had dozens of scrolls that he purchased with the mummies back in 1835 or whenever he purchased these. He had dozens of scrolls and mummies, and the Book of Abraham is only
okay. But where are you getting that? Hold on, Flipshot. Where are you getting that information from? Which source?
Concerning what? How many scrolls he had? It's all.
Yeah, no. This argument that you're trying to create, okay, which by the way is not the actual position here. Just so you know, okay.
Actual position of what?
Like, as I said, even the non-LDS people, when they write about this, the scholars give the context. They give the historical context behind the papyri, okay? Behind what it is that they're looking at, behind what it is that your church has claimed, okay, is part of what Joseph translated, okay? And they're in unanimous agreement that it's all fraudulent. And here's the other thing. Even if I grant
how can they say that when they don't have the original text?
They have
the original scroll.
This is the thing you're missing, Flipshot. They have part of it. Okay,
they have a few small fragments.
Yeah, and those few he doesn't even get right, Flipshot. Those few he doesn't even get correct. That's the point.
That's not what he didn't translate from those. That's what I'm saying.
He translated parts of those, which even your church admits. Okay.
He translated parts of all of the scrolls that he had.
There's parts, okay, of what he translated that were still preserved even after the fire took place. Okay, even after you had the burning of the material. Okay, and none of it he gets right.
That we have now weren't in Chicago or in the fire. These records, these scrolls were separated after the death of Joseph Smith.
Okay, who argues that? Who argues that, Flipshot?
That we don't have it all?
Yeah, no. Who argues? No. Flipshot, you're trying to create an argument that you have none of it. I'm saying who argues that? Okay. Because even your side admits they have parts of it.
Okay. We do have parts.
Okay, and that's my point. Even the parts he doesn't get right. It's completely fraudulent through and through, 100%. That's
my
the argument.
claim is that he didn't translate the part that we have. Because as you say, the
If he
text that
didn't
we have
translate the
now,
parts, okay, if he didn't translate the parts that you have, that you currently have, what did he translate and where is that? Is that all gone? I just argued against that position.
we haven't found it yet. We haven't found it yet. So
you're
it's missing.
okay. Who says that? Who says that you don't have any of it right now because you haven't found it yet? Who argues that within your church?
Everybody that I've talked to, but
I don't care about the people you've talked to. I'm talking about actually codified information on a source where that's argued for. I know that's an argument you guys want to create in the background to try and defend it. But the scholarly argument
is that
hold on, Flipshot. The argument within scholarship, okay, is that we do have parts of what he translated, and even your church.
Not what he translated, what he
translated based on the sources.
It's what he had in his possession.
Where is that argued for within your sources? Where is that argued for within your sources? Your standpoint that you have nothing right now.
That the church's position is that the fragments that we have now were in the possession of
you're
Joseph
saying it.
Smith.
But where do they say that?
But
you're saying the church says that. Where do they say that, Flipshot? Where do they say that?
On the church website. Go ahead and look.
They don't say that on the website. You get it up for me right now, and I'll let you share your screen, and we can read it together.
I'm on my phone right now, so I won't be able to.
You can get it up on your phone, and you can send me the picture, and I'll literally look at it if you can get it up right now. It doesn't exist, Flipshot. You're trying to create an argument that you've argued for with your friends in the background, okay, which your church doesn't even argue for, and even your scholars don't argue for. Okay?
I'm telling you that the church
okay, so let me ask you, Flipshot, let me ask you, Flipshot, let me ask you a question then. Flipshot, let me ask you,
we're in the possession of Joseph Smith.
Don't. Who says that in your church?
That they were in his possession? Your claim is that he had them.
That you currently don't have anything. Which of your church leaders argue that?
No, but I never said that. I said that
you were trying to say they haven't been found yet. No, Flipshot.
No,
I'm asking you about what Joseph translated. Flipshot, I'm asking you about what Joseph translated. And I said, where is that? And you said it hasn't been found yet. And then I asked you, which of your church leaders argue that? Which of your scholars argue that? Because even your scholars and church leaders admit, alongside the non-LDS scholars, that we do have parts of what Joseph translated that we can
Not what he translated, what was in his possession.
None of your church leaders argue that, Flipshot. Only you're arguing that. You're the only person arguing that. You're the only person arguing that, Flipshot. That's why you sound silly. You're the only person arguing this position.
You're the only person arguing what you're saying. That's what I'm saying.
No, I'm not.
Only person that says that the church doesn't say that.
No, hold on. Let me give names. Robert Rittner. Okay. Robert Rittner. Okay.
He's a member of the church.
Bear. Okay. Klaus
Bear. He's a member of the church.
Okay. Doesn't have to be. Okay. They've looked at the
I'm
evidence.
just saying.
Incredible Egyptologists.
I understand.
Okay, so you've Robert Rittner, you have Klaus Bear. Hold on, I'm giving you my argument, okay? You've Robert Rittner, you've Klaus Bear, you've Patrick A. Wilson. I've given you 3 names here with sources, okay? You haven't given me one name and one source yet that affirm your position.
My position that Joseph Smith was not translating from the pieces that we have? Is that what you're...
You argued, I'll repeat back to you your argument, okay? Because I don't even know if you understand your argument at this point. Okay, I think you've even confused
yourself. Explain to me what my argument was, and I will correct you if you're wrong.
I asked you, okay, in terms of the material that Joseph translated, where is that today? Okay, and you said we have not found it yet. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have it.
You said we don't have it and we have not found it. Whatever. And then I asked you, give me one leader in your church and one scholar in your church that affirms that position, and you've yet to give it.
Okay. I'll have to look it up because I don't have that information.
Okay, look it up, but I tell you why, because it doesn't exist. I can tell you that right now, but I want you to look it up. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go and check the stuff that I just gave you. The other problem that you have, right, is that when your
claim, I understand your claim. So let me make sure I understand your claim correctly. Is that these 3 scholars that you gave me?
There's more than 3. I just gave you 3 examples.
The 3 that you gave me and others, however many,
all of them.
They, okay.
Every non-LDS scholar.
Okay. And even the LDS scholars, what is your claim that they are saying that the church says that this is what Joseph translated the Book of Abraham from, and we have them, and his translation is incorrect?
They look at the material that your church claims that they have, okay? And they look at the
They have it
facsimile.
because it was gifted to them.
What are you talking about? That's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about something else.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
Okay.
they also talk about the
I'm telling you why
facsimiles.
the church
They
has it
also,
now.
hold on. They also talk about the facsimiles, where Joseph includes under the facsimiles his translation methods. He goes through step by step how he did it. Okay. They look at that and they're like, no, that's completely wrong, completely fraudulent. He's making the whole thing up. That's the conclusion they come to based on the evidence. Okay. That's the conclusion by every non-LDS scholar outside of your church. It's only your church and your scholars that argue against that position. And that's why I'm trying to get you not to engage in circular reasoning and confirmation bias. Because if you did what I'm telling you to do, you'd leave your church immediately.
Okay.
If you took an evidence-based approach, you wouldn't be Mormon anymore. And here's the other thing, right? Let me grant you that the translation is accurate, okay, even though it's not. Let me grant you that it's divine inspiration for a minute, okay? Do you believe
the Book of Abraham or just the facsimiles?
Let's start with the Book of Abraham. Let's start with the Book of Abraham.
Or just the facsimiles.
Let's start with what you call the Book of Abraham in the Pearl of Great Price. Okay, let's start with that. Okay. The words of the Book of Abraham, right, within that, okay, are they the actual words of Abraham?
A church would say that yes, they are the words of Abraham.
So why are there errors in it?
Errors? What do you mean by errors?
So I'll give you an example, right? Abraham, when he talks about the king of Egypt, he refers to him as Pharaoh. Pharaoh was not a semantic term that was in use at Abraham's time. Okay, it's an anachronistic error. Okay, so what's going on there? Why is he making a mistake?
So you understand that this was translated in the mid 1800s, correct?
But you know that's not what your church argues, right?
What? That even it wasn't Joseph, translated in 1830?
No, even Joseph argues, right, that these are the words of Abraham, okay, and that he translated them by divine intervention, okay?
This is an English translation of the words of Abraham.
Right, but why would he change the word from king to Pharaoh? So Joseph was corrupting his own translation as he was translating it.
Okay, it's understanding of the understanding of the king of Egypt in modern English is Pharaoh.
No, people still use the term king of Egypt. We know what that means. It's not outlandish. Okay, so he could have translated it as king if he wanted to be accurate.
He could have.
Okay? That's one. The other thing is that in one of the passages, right, he refers to within Mesopotamia an area called Potiphar's Hill. Potiphar is an Egyptian name. It wasn't in Mesopotamia. Okay, so it's a geographical error. Why is he making a geographical error, Flipshot?
A geographical error saying that Potiphar's Hill, something that was named Potiphar's Hill, is in Mesopotamia.
No, it's geographically wrong because hold on, Egypt is not in Mesopotamia. Okay. Correct. And the problem is that specific name within it doesn't exist. This is what I'm arguing for. Egyptologists are again. There's a unanimous conclusion here. That's an incorrect, anachronistic error because there was no Potiphar's Hill within Mesopotamia. In other words, Joseph just made it up. So why is he making up stuff?
My contention is that Abraham, I guess, made that up.
Oh, so Abraham was wrong. So Abraham was wrong.
Joseph is
how far do you want to go back with this? So Abraham's making stuff up, and Joseph is clearly not divinely inspired because if he was, he'd be able to correct Abraham and say Abraham got it wrong. That would have been the intervention. That would have been a demonstration.
Our claim, we don't claim that our prophets are infallible.
Oh, so Joseph produced a translation which is inaccurate. Okay, when we look at data. Now, let me ask you something, right? If this translation in a number of places is inaccurate, okay, why should I read it and believe in it, okay, if Joseph is demonstrating that he can't even accurately translate something? And he's getting stuff wrong historically, geographically, from an Egyptology perspective. Why should I go along with that?
I don't
if
think he's
producing a
getting
false
it wrong.
Egypt,
I think
okay,
you're misunderstanding.
so
But
Egyptologists,
even
hold
if
on,
I
flip shot.
grant even if I grant your
Hold
claim,
on, flip shot. Egyptologists are wrong when they say that he got it wrong, even though they're experts in the field, and Joseph wasn't.
yeah, they're saying that it's out of place.
Yeah, they're saying it's
For sure.
incorrect based on the best data they have available to them. It's not correct.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so are
And
they wrong or is Joseph wrong?
No, I'll agree with them as long if that's what the best scholarship that we have. I'll agree that it's
that's the
out
conclusion.
of place. It's out of place.
So Joseph is producing a faulty, incorrect translation with incorrect details, and I should believe in it. That doesn't sound very convincing.
No, that's not what I said. I just said the word
I'm saying that.
Potiphar.
I'm saying that. Flipshot,
Okay.
I'm saying that. That's my position. I'm saying if Joseph is producing a false translation with incorrect details, why should I go along with it and trust in it?
But I never said that the details were incorrect.
But do you believe they're incorrect?
I believe with the current understanding that it is out of place.
So it's incorrect.
Currently, as we understand, as the Egyptologists understand now, that it's out of place.
So you okay? Hold on, just so I know, you're agreeing with me that it's incorrect. What he has there, the information, it's not correct.
That it's out of place.
Okay, flip shot. As I said, Potiphar's Hill does not exist or never existed in Mesopotamia, according to Egyptologists. Okay, Joseph is anachronistically and incorrectly creating a place that never existed in an area where it would have never existed. Okay, that's the agreement within scholarship. It's regarded by Egyptologists as incorrect. Okay, it's
how can they possibly know that it never existed?
I just argued it for you. Okay, Potiphar is an Egyptian name. Mesopotamia is separate from Egypt. There was no Potiphar's Hill place name in a non-Egyptian place. That's the point. That's why they've concluded that it's false.
And there's no possible way that could be any different.
No, but it's based on the evidence. No.
Okay.
Think of it this
way. I agree.
Okay,
based on the current evidence.
Flip shot. Let me give you an example. Okay. Let's say the time of Jesus. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. If I said if I was writing a story about the time of Jesus and I said Peter took out a cell phone and made a call, would that be correct, or would that be so out of place that you'd be in agreement with me that that's completely incorrect?
It'd be 100% in agreement with you that it is out of place.
Exactly, and that's the conclusion they come to, because there was no Potiphar's Hill in Mesopotamia. Geographically, it's not plausible on any level. That's the point within Egyptology, and that's one of the reasons among many. Okay, he had Falk in this video, for example, David A. Falk. He gives another example where Joseph takes a specific name. Okay, that was strictly female, okay, meaning historically it was only ever used for ladies, okay, and he applies it to a male character in a historical period where it just does not work, okay. This is one example of many. I gave you the one with the king of Egypt instead of Pharaoh, okay. He gets geographical stuff incorrect, he gets linguistic stuff incorrect, he gets cultural stuff incorrect, okay. When that evidence is compounding itself in front of me, if I look at that and I'm like, well, Joseph is getting so much here incorrect. I mean, he even talks about Pharaoh, right, making sacrifices, okay, outside of Egypt, okay, even though there's no historical record that Pharaoh ever did that, okay, or the king of Egypt ever did that, okay. Again, he's creating another historical pseudo-narrative that, again, is not verifiable with the data that we have. The argument that they would present is that's not true on a historical basis, okay. So, again, if I'm looking at this, Joseph just clearly making stuff up, why should I believe in it? Are you there?
Sorry, my speakers died, so I'm trying to switch speakers over.
Okay, no worries. But did you hear what I was saying? What I was arguing is that even with the Pharaoh performing sacrifices, okay, in Mesopotamia, again, that's something also Egyptologists are in agreement that the Pharaoh never did, or the king of Egypt never did, okay? So Joseph is creating, again, in this specific instance, a pseudo-narrative of something that isn't true, okay? Egyptologists looking and say, the king of Egypt never did that. never went out into Mesopotamia and sacrificed 3 virgins and was doing all this stuff that Joseph claimed that they do in the book of Abraham. Okay, it's another pseudo historical narrative that Joseph created. You know what it begins to look like, Flipshot? With all due respect, it begins to look like fiction. Okay, if everything Joseph is creating is contrary to what we know today based on the evidence that we have available to us, it begins to look like a fictional narrative. Okay, because he's getting so much stuff wrong. Think of it from this way, right? Flipshot, he's getting stuff wrong. He's making stuff up that can't be verified and is against the data that we have today. Okay, when you start compounding all that stuff, it just looks like a narrative. That's all it looks like.
I understand exactly what you're saying. My contention is that you'll see these anachronisms, just like they did in the Book of Mormon, that the anachronisms will be verified to be not anachronistic as you move forward. So
when it's been what?
In the time of the Lord.
When's that going to happen, Flipshot?
I don't know. Do you know the Lord better than I don't know when the Lord will.
You know, but the point that I'm making is it's been almost 200 years, okay? We're talking essentially 200 years here, okay? Close to 200 years, okay? And again, everything that I've mentioned to you today, it's still the mainstream position today based on the evidence. Is that not concerning for you? At all in the slightest? Because if I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, all the data seems to contradict everything Joseph's saying, and it seems like Joseph's just consistently making stuff up. That doesn't look good.
Well, I've looked at these things and I see a lot of things that he did get right with this. And so
what?
I think the things that...
Like what?
I don't have... I wasn't prepared for to discuss this today, so I don't have any of the information in front of me, and I'm not able to look it up in just a couple of 20 seconds or something. So
all right, look, fair enough. Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, I'm definitely not prepared. I know that you are prepared and you had all this stuff and you have all your documents in front of you, and I just jumped on because I was curious. What was going to say. So I don't have any information in front of me.
No, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay.
So you're telling me to produce evidence, and it's like, give me a couple days, and I could email it to you. The evidence
here's
that I have. But
Flipshot, here's the thing, right? I do this every Friday at the same time. So if you want to come back next Friday with your sources, you can come back next Friday, and we can go through your sources. But in saying that, I have 2 questions. Okay. The first question is, I want you just to, again, it's not really a question. It's more so a consideration on your part, okay? Again, I really want you to think about this for a moment, okay? After this stream, just really sit down and think about this, okay? If it's only my church, okay, and my scholars, based on evidence, by the way, and we're talking about verifiable stuff based on evidence, okay, that are defending this, and every single non-LDS person is in agreement based on evidence. It's not based on like this preconceived anti-Mormon conspiracy. It's not that. They look at the data, right? They would be happy to admit things are true for your church if they had the evidence in front of them that could show that and demonstrate that. Okay. So what I'm asking you is to really reflect on this and think about this. Okay. If every single non-LDS scholar is in agreement based on the evidence that Joseph's claims, okay, what Joseph produced is fraudulent in nature. Okay, based on all the evidence and the sources, okay? Really try and wrestle with the implication of that. Because that, for me, even if I was a member of your church, hypothetically, I'd be concerned by that. I'd be sitting there saying, but it's only my church that affirmed this, but no one else.
So here's the thing, and here's where your argument falls apart here, is that the non-LDS scholars, what they're claiming about the current extant fragments that we have is absolutely correct, and I would attest 100% to that, it not containing any of the text of the Book of Abraham.
That's not their claim.
That it doesn't contain the text of the Book of Abraham? What have you been saying? That it...
I said that what they have, again, we're going around in a circle here, okay?
That what we currently have does not contain the text of the Book of Abraham.
No. That's not what they're arguing. Flipshot, you need to hear the argument. I'll give it to you one more time.
Okay.
I want you to actually, instead of arguing against my position when you know you don't have the sources and you're not prepared to argue it, take what I'm saying and go and test it after the stream, okay?
Okay.
look the stuff up, okay? As opposed to coming to me with an unprepared argument. What I was trying to argue with you is that the facsimile represents material of what Joseph translated, okay? So there is tangible data there that they
Just
can
the
look at.
facsimile itself, yes.
Yeah, but that's part of what Joseph translated, okay, or what he claims to have translated, and they're in agreement it's totally
Well, he
fraudulent.
copied the facsimile over
Yeah.
to the Book of Abraham.
And they're in agreement it's totally fraudulent. On top of that, okay, the other thing is that of the papyri that survived, okay, even your scholars and even non-LDS scholars are in agreement that part of that papyri, you can try and argue against this all this one, but go and check it, okay, instead of arguing against a position you don't have a source for, okay. The agreement is that part of those papyri that have remained and have survived are in fact original to what Joseph translated, even if it is just a small percentage. And the problem
Yeah,
is
and
that
my contention is the church does not say that Joseph had those in possession, but it was
they
not
do say
from
that if you go and
not the
check
parts
the
that he
sources.
translated.
Check the sources.
Okay,
Flipshot.
I
Don't
will
just tell
I will
me that's what
double
your
check the
says.
church sources on
Okay.
this, but
That's the
my
first thing.
understanding is that the church will say that the fragments that we have now do not include the text from the Book
Yeah.
of Abraham.
They don't argue that. Check the sources, okay?
Okay.
That's the first thing. Second thing, okay, is from a theological perspective, okay? Let me ask you a theology question, okay?
Okay.
Because let's get away from the historical stuff for a moment. Let me try and give you a more spiritual argument here, okay? If we talk about the Bible and what the Bible says about God, okay? Doctrine and Covenants, section 130, 22, when referring to God the Father, it says a body of flesh and bones as tangible as any man's. So I'm assuming you believe that, right? That God the Father has a physical body?
Yes.
Where can that be demonstrated biblically and in the early church, as far as the apostolic fathers of the church are concerned, that this is the view they consistently held to of God the Father?
I would have to research that.
Okay, well, as someone who's looked at it, Flipshot, none of the early church fathers claim that. Okay, it's only Joseph that claims that.
Okay.
And the Bible itself doesn't claim that. It's only Joseph that claims that. Okay, that for me is very problematic, because when I look at the biblical data, when referring to God the Father is the eternal sovereign Lord over creation. Okay, and if I take seriously,
And I agree with that.
Well, you don't, because you also believe that he has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as any man's, and you also believe he went through a
Sure.
process.
You believe that he does too.
No, I don't.
In the incarnation of Jesus, you don't believe that Jesus has a body of flesh and bone?
That's not God the Father.
It is in your Christian understanding.
No, it's not. You're talking about modalism. I'm not a modalist.
Yeah, but you believe that they're the three are the same, right? The same
No.
ontological
No.
essence?
No, we believe, hold on. We believe, do you understand what the position on the Trinity is, or do you want me to tell you what it is?
I'm just saying, if you believe that Jesus is God, you believe
Yeah.
that God has a body.
No, that's not the argument. Okay, you don't understand basic Trinitarian thought. Okay?
Okay.
This is something you'd need to check, but I'll give you a quick breakdown of it and you can check it after, okay? The Trinitarian position is that we have three persons, okay, who are all divine as a consequence of the fact that they all subsist by the one ousia, okay, or the one essence, or the one divine nature, if you will, okay? We have someone else coming on stream, so what I'll do is I'll
Which is
wrap
not
it up
biblical, but go ahead.
well, it is. I can demonstrate it biblically if you like, just as much
You
as
can
you can.
demonstrate that the Trinity in the Bible?
Oh, of course. The Spirit of God is referred to as Yahweh. Jesus is referred to as Yahweh, and God the Father is referred to as Yahweh.
Is Yahweh a who, or is that a person, or is it a title?
Yahweh is God's name. And how many gods are there according to the Bible?
Many, multiple.
Where does it say that?
There's multiple gods in the Bible.
Where does it? No. Where does it say there's multiple gods in the Bible? Because according to Psalm 96:5, all the other gods are idols, meaning they don't exist. There's only one true God, which is Yahweh. Because according to Isaiah 43:10, before me there was no God.
Yeah, but the ancient Israelites, whether there is only one God or whether there's multiple, the ancient Israelites believed that there were multiple gods. But
you
they
can,
were
here's the thing,
commanded to worship only the one God.
But Flipshot, you can believe in something, doesn't mean it's true. Like I can believe the Cookie Monster exists, doesn't mean the Cookie
Okay.
Monster actually exists. Does it? Does
Cookie
it,
Monster,
Flipshot?
sure.
So if
He's
I
a-
believe in the Cookie Monster, he now exists.
Yeah, you can see him every day on Sesame Street.
No, you know what I'm saying. I'm talking about tangibly in the real world. You know what I'm getting at, Flipshot. Okay? Tangibly in the real world, regardless of whether I believe he exists or not, he doesn't exist, right?
I mean, this is kind of this argument doesn't make any sense.
It does. It does. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And this is what I'm
About
trying to
Cookie
explain to you.
Monster. Because
No,
Cookie Monster is an actual puppet.
Yeah, but he doesn't exist as an actual tangible being, entity. Okay.
It's
What
a
I was trying to
puppet.
get at.
They're-
Yeah, but he's not a tangible entity. Okay. What I mean by tangible entity is that he does, like, without human control, okay, without human direction, okay, he doesn't exist by himself. He's not self-existent. He's not able to. You get my point, okay? When you're
Okay,
talking
I understand. I guess I understand what you're saying now.
Okay.
That a human created the character of Cookie Monster, let's say.
Exactly. It was conceived by a human mind. Okay, so you get what I'm saying. Okay.
Okay.
The same argument I'm presenting here is that if I conceive something in my mind, okay, I'm dumbing it down. If I conceive something in my mind, it doesn't mean the thing that I've conceived actually exists. Okay. In terms of the biblical testimony according to Psalm 96:5 and according to Isaiah 43:10, just to name a few passages, okay, there's only one God in creation, okay, and every other God is just an idol, meaning they don't exist. They were just
Isaiah 43 is talking about the incomparability of the God of Israel, not that he's the only God in existence.
Hold on. It does say that before me there was no God formed, neither shall there be after me. I am the first and the last. Besides me, there are no other gods. So
right, and he uses the same language to describe the city of Babylon. He's saying that the city of Babylon is the only city in existence.
Where does he say that?
He describes the city of Babylon, that there's no other city besides the city of Babylon.
Where does he say only Babylon exists? And secondly, let me help you out.
He doesn't. He says.
This your argument.
That's the thing. I'm saying this is an ancient Hebrew statement of incomparability, not of non-existence here.
But he reiterates the claim several times across several of the prophetic books. So I think if you keep repeating the same claim, you're trying to make a point. And secondly, Flipshot, let me make it easy for you. Have you read any critical commentaries on Isaiah?
Critical commentaries?
Yeah,
no, I focus on just reading the book of Isaiah.
So have you read any Hebraic commentators that have commentated who are
No, I'm not a biblical scholar or a biblical expert.
All right. Well, let me show you something, okay? Give me 1 second. Let me show you something. We'll finish with this, okay? And then I'll bring on the other guest. And this is what I'm encouraging you to do, okay?
All right.
Do you see this?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So you can see up there the New International Commentary on the Old Testament, okay? And this is by John N. Oswald, okay? This is one example, okay? This is a critical commentary, Hebraic commentary on the book of Isaiah, okay? Every commentator has commentated on Isaiah and on the biblical corpus, as far as the Old Testament is concerned, is consistent in the fact that these verses, okay, are referring to the fact that God alone exists as God and that there is no other God besides him. Okay, that the other gods are idols. They are created by the figments of men's imaginations, but they do not exist by themselves. Okay, that there is only one God. Okay, now if you
and that's a fine claim, but that's not necessarily what the ancient Israelites believed, that the other gods didn't exist.
Hold on. According to who? I just gave you one scholar here. This is one of them.
I'll read it.
Okay,
I'll read it.
Okay, check it. Okay, because you're making a claim, the Jewish Israelites claim, and you didn't give me one source to back that up. I literally presented you in.
They were worshiping them, so.
But you didn't hear what I said. Just because I believe something exists, okay, that I conceived it in my mind, doesn't mean it actually exists. You can conceive anything in your mind. It doesn't mean it exists.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're correct.
So yeah, but what's the biblical testimony? As John N. Oswalt has commentated, as every other Hebraic commentator has commentated, okay? The consistent testimony, okay, in the Old Testament is that there's only one God and all the other gods are idols, meaning they were conceived by the minds of men. And
Okay.
God's proclamation across the Old Testament is trying to get them to understand the fact that it's only him and him alone that exists as God, okay? That everything else does not exist. One good example of this, by the way, just so you know, is the example of Baal, where you have Ahab and Elijah, okay?
Mhm.
Ahab believes, okay, in a god called Baal, right? Elijah believes in the one true God, okay? And if you read the context of that, what ends up happening? Elijah ends up making fun of them because their God is doing nothing.
Yeah,
Why?
I know
Because
the
he
story.
doesn't exist. He
I
doesn't
understand.
exist.
I know the story.
Okay. So this is the point. I want you to think about these things critically, okay? So if there's only one God, and that one God has identified himself with three persons, that's the Trinity, my friend. And consistently across the Old and New Testament, that's the conclusion. And that's what also, hold on, that's what also the earliest church leaders believed. Okay?
Well,
So hold on,
the
hold on.
LDS.
Hold on. We're gonna finish it here, okay? Because I want to bring Porter on before it gets too late.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I want you to check that. I've given you one commentary
Okay.
on Isaiah. I've given you several sources to check for the book of Abraham. I want you to actually look at what the people outside your church are saying and what is the consistent viewpoint. And then I want you to come back if you can. If you can't, that's okay as well.
So
busy or whatever. Come back
you
next
haven't
Friday.
said anything that I don't believe, right? Other than
But
that,
you-
the three beings in the one Godhead
But you
are
believe they're
the
three
same
gods.
being instead of three separate beings.
No, you believe they're three gods, and then you believe in other gods outside of them.
No,
because you
they're
believe
one God. They are
You believe-
one God. They're in the Godhead. Godhead is a term in the Bible, not the word Trinity. This
Hold
is
on.
the LDS understanding, is that the three persons or three beings, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, comprise one God.
No,
They're
you're
three
talking about-
different and distinct beings, but they comprise
Okay.
one God or one Godhead.
But
That
no,
is
that's
the
not what your
Mormon church
believes.
understanding, which is
That's not-
different than the Trinity.
That's not what your church believes. Your church
Yes, it
believes-
is.
So they're not three gods.
They're three separate individuals, but they
Are
are
they three
one
separate gods
God.
as well? But are they three separate gods as well? Okay, let me
No,
ask you something.
we believe that they are one
hold on,
God
hold
because
on.
they are
Hold on,
one in unity.
Flip shot. Let me ask you something. Is Jesus by nature his own individual God?
No, the three are together.
So Jesus being God is contingent on the Spirit and the is contingent upon the nature of the Spirit and the Father. He's not his own separate being then.
He is subordinate to the Father.
But is his natures separate from the Father's nature, or do they share the same?
No, they
essence?
have the same. They have the same.
You see where I'm going with this?
They have. I'm trying to make
this
sure
is
I
the
say the
rabbit
right
hole.
word here.
Flipshot, this
I
is the
just want to
rabbit
make sure
hole.
I say the right word.
This
So
is
I'm trying to get it
hold
straight
on,
in my
Flipshot.
mind.
Flipshot, this is the rabbit hole you're going to go down to, because the next question I'm going to ask you is Jesus's being, is it divine? And then you're going to tell me yes. And then I'm going to ask you, is the Spirit's being divine? And then you're going to tell me yes. And then I'm going to ask you, is the Father's being divine? And then you're going to tell me yes. And I'm going to say, well, does that mean you have three divine beings? And then you're going to say yes. That's three gods. Whether you like it or not, that's what it is. Okay? And that's your problem. That doesn't represent the testimony of Scripture.
The problem is that we believe what it says in the Gospel of John is that they are one.
No, but you don't believe that.
Yes,
Okay?
we do, that they are one in purpose and unity.
Produce to me your church leaders who say there's only one God and there's no other God besides that one God.
Yes, we believe that the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are three separate beings comprising one Godhead.
So can you become God in your church?
We can participate in the divine essence. We can become like God.
That's not what your church believes. Do you want me to tell you what Lorenzo Snow said?
I know exactly what Lorenzo Snow said,
What did
and I
Lorenzo
believe
Snow
that.
say? Hold on, was he wrong?
No.
Okay, so what did Lorenzo Snow say? We'll end it on this, and then I want you to think critically about it, because it's going to put you in a bit of a
As
loop.
God, what is it? As God is
As
though
man is, no, no,
man
as
is,
man is, as man is, God once was,
God once
as God
was.
is, man may become.
and you believe that. You believe
I-
Christ condescended and came to earth. He was once a man, and he.
No,
It's
hold
like
on, hold on. That's not what your exaltation theology says. Okay, your exaltation theology extends to the Father as well. That the Father was also once a man. Okay, and then became
no.
exalted.
It never says that he was a mortal man. He said that.
I didn't use the word mortal. I said man.
Okay.
Okay.
No, he
This is
wasn't
what you're-
once
He was a
a
man.
man.
Yes,
He did
according
take
to
on
Doctrine and
flesh.
Covenant.
He did
Yes.
take on flesh.
Why did he take on flesh, Flipshot? For what reason?
I guess I'll have to ask him.
So you can't even tell me why he took on flesh. Why did Jesus take on flesh?
He took on flesh so that he condescended to come so that he could bring us up to God.
Right. So in other words, it was for the purpose of redemption, right?
Redemption, yes.
Right. So where is this doctrine in Scripture that God the Father also went through a process of exaltation?
It's in the Doctrine and Covenants.
No, I said in Scripture. When I say Scripture,
Okay. I believe that the Doctrine and Covenants is Scripture.
Yeah, but I don't regard your Scriptures as Scripture.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm referring to
So
the Bible.
you're asking if it's in your Scripture.
No.
Is that what you're asking?
So you don't believe in the Bible?
I do believe in the Bible.
Okay, so where in the Bible does it say it?
Okay. So clarify, because my canon of Scripture is larger than yours.
Yeah, but you understand, going into this conversation, I don't believe in your canon. Okay, so if I
Okay,
ask
but you just said Scripture,
if I ask
and
you-
the
yeah,
Doctrine and Covenants is Scripture to me.
to you, but I never
Okay.
said to you. I asked you generally, and you know that I don't believe in that. Okay, so you
Okay.
should have had enough critical thought to
It's
know
not
that
my
to
fault
bring
you
the
don't
Bible.
believe in it.
Okay, yeah, but you haven't proven it. But anyway, that's besides the point. Where in the
Okay.
Bible strictly does Jesus?
So you're talking to a Mormon, so you should understand that our
Dude,
word for
you're
Scripture
making it-
is
you're
different,
making it- Stop making an
or
emotional
we have a
argument.
different definition for what Scripture is.
Flipshot, stop making an emotional argument. Where in the Bible does it say God the Father was once a man?
I don't know where in the Bible it says
It
that.
doesn't say it anywhere.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
believe you.
Which early church leaders believe that?
That God what? That God had
the
a body?
Father was, yeah, God the Father was once a man. Which early church fathers believe that?
I don't have this information for you. I'm
None
sorry.
of them believed that. None of them believed that.
Okay.
So why is that?
I'll trust you.
Why did none of them believe what Joseph believed?
Because they were not apostles.
So none
Or
of the
prophets.
apostles, none of the apostles of the apostles were apostles, is what you're telling me.
What's that?
So you know that when we talk, okay, well, I'm going to end on this because I want to bring on the other guest because he's been waiting for a while now. We'll end on this, okay? And I want you to do your research for next week, okay? When
I'll read this.
When we talk about the apostolic fathers, okay, we are talking about the earliest church leaders who received their teachings directly from the apostles themselves. So, for example,
Sure.
Ignatius of Antioch, right? He was a student of John the Apostle. Same applies to Polycarp, okay?
Yeah.
So
I've heard people mention these people and heard quotes
Right.
from them, but I have not made it a personal study of mine
Well,
to study
none
this
of the
stuff. So.
this is my argument. None of
Okay.
the students of the apostles believe that God the Father wanted a body of flesh and bones as tangible as any man's. None of them believe that. Why is that?
Like you said, I haven't made this a study.
Were
So
the apostles
I would have to
terrible
look at it
teachers?
and
Hold on, flip shot. Were the apostles terrible teachers?
I don't think so.
So what happened? Why did none of them believe that? Why did none of them believe that our souls are eternal like your church claims?
That our souls are eternal?
Yeah, your church claims that. I had
Yeah.
one of the members of your
Well, we
church.
don't believe in the eternity of the soul
You don't?
because the soul is in the Mormon church teachings, the soul is the combination of the body and spirit. We believe our spirits
You
are
don't-
eternal, but not necessarily our soul.
So your eternal spirit, which of them believed in that?
Probably all of them if they were taught by the apostles.
Yeah, none of them believed it. We have their ratings.
Okay.
So
And they
why is that?
And they specifically said that.
And where is it in the Bible as well? Where is that in the Bible? That's what I'd love to know.
Where's what?
That your spirit is eternal.
Well, we would point to scriptures like Jeremiah 1:5 that
So what's the
before
context
he
of
formed
Jeremiah?
us,
What's the
that you would
context?
say
So,
that it's
hold
just
on.
in his mind.
No, I wouldn't say that. You want to know what my argument is?
Okay.
If you bother to read one commentary, critical commentary on Jeremiah, that's not what's being said there.
Okay.
Okay?
Uh,
No critical Hebraic commentator comes to that conclusion on Jeremiah 1:5.
not one, huh?
Yeah. Unless
Okay,
you can
I'll
give
find
me,
some
unless
to
you can give me
do,
one.
and I'll bring those back to you next week.
The conclusion in relation to that has to do with what's it called? Foreknowledge, okay? Foreknowledge is not the same as pre-existence. You know that, right?
Right. And you would say it's
Right.
foreknowledge,
So
and
how
we
would
would say it's pre-mortal existence.
But if I know something, it's foreknowledge. He doesn't say pre-existence. Nowhere in that passage does it use the term pre-existence.
Right. You
So
don't have
you're
to
proving
use
my
it.
point. Flipshot, you're
No,
proving
I'm
my
just
point
saying
now.
he's saying that before he formed him in the belly, he knew him.
Right.
So
That's
if
called
before he
foreknowledge,
formed
right?
them, how can you
But
know someone if it's just in your mind and you haven't created them yet?
that's called
How can you
foreknowledge.
know them
Flipshot, that's called
if they don't
foreknowledge. Yes.
exist?
Yeah, that's called foreknowledge. If I know I'm going to
Right.
create
That's
something in
what I'm
advance, I
saying.
know what it is that I'm
You
creating.
say
It's
it's
called
foreknowledge, and we say it means that there's a
No,
pre-mortality.
no, because what you argue is that it's eternal. Nowhere in that passage does it say it's eternal.
Right. But he still
But
knew
you're proving my
him
point.
before.
But
So
how does
our
that mean?
argument is that he existed before.
So your argument is foreknowledge equals pre-existence, which equals eternal spirit. That's your argument. Come on, Flipshot, you're better than that. Will I let you go and you can do your research and you can check the commentaries in the meantime? Bring on the other guest.
Yeah, if you want to let me go, I can go.
Okay. Well, if you get the chance, Irish time. Okay. Friday 7 p.m. is the time. Generally speaking, I do the streams. Okay. If you want to come back, have a look at the sources, and then come back more prepared. Because I don't want to keep bashing you, because otherwise it's not fair.
No, I mean, I just came on because I wanted to have a civil discussion and conversation. I mean, I understand though that you're very, very set in your ways, and
Well, it's based on evidence. I'm said it's not based
okay,
on
that's
any
fine. And
preconceived
my
positions.
testimony of the church and of the prophet is also based on that.
No, I understand. But that's not based on evidence. Porter, give me 2 seconds and I'll bring you on. Okay. We have someone in the what's it called waiting backstage. I'll bring them on in 2 seconds. I just have to do something. Okay, Porter, are you LDS?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, are you LDS? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can't hear
I think
you
he's
for
having
some reason
audio issues.
if you're talking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Why can't I hear you?
I think Porter's having audio issues.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I think Porter's having audio issues.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Yeah, I can.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Give me 1 sec. I'll try something else.
Okay. Let me try this one.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay,
Okay.
yeah. No, the whole
Hold
the
on.
whole
I
last-
only have, just so you know in advance, I only have about, because you came on very late.
Yeah.
I only have about 5 minutes, and then I have to go because it's late where I am.
Sure.
So we can have a very short exchange, and then as I told the other guest, Friday at 7 p.m. It's Irish time, by the way, just so you know, is when these streams start. I'd recommend you come on closer to the start because, I'm supposed to finish by 9,
Right.
and then once it goes past 9, I'm kind of buying time that I don't really have.
Sure. I know. We have work in the US, so I have to schedule around when I can come. So but I'll try my best to get here a little bit earlier. No, I'm just saying that last interaction was kind of a mess. A lot of the scholarly sources you quoted were kind of against the general consensus of the scholarship. For instance, you said one non-LDS scholar who supports the idea that Isaiah is talking about simply like gods that are made or attributes or the incomparability of God, but that's Michael Heiser's position. The scripture that he was
but there's
citing-
hold on, there's no church father that affirms that. Okay.
Who cares? It's the scholarship. You
No,
want the
it does
scholarship of
matter.
the church fathers.
No, 1 second. If you're talking about the earliest traditions and the earliest interpretations of these verses, okay, that's found within the early church. Okay.
Of
You don't
Isaiah
have-
chapter 43? No, it's
No,
not.
in
It's found
terms
the
of
Jewish
their
literature.
understanding, Porter, in terms of their understanding of God, okay, there's not one of them that agree with Joseph's claim that God the Father was once a man who lived on another planet, unless you can
Now we're
produce it.
shifting claims. So initially you claimed
No,
that
that's where we started. Hold on.
No,
We take it
hold
by tape, Porter. That's where we started. We started with God the Father once being a man, and then he shifted into the Trinity. He took it away to the Trinity because he didn't want to talk about that. So I'm asking you specifically now about God the Father, okay? If you have those sources. Which early church fathers, Porter, which early church fathers believe that God the Father was once a man, who had a body of flesh and bones as tangible as any man's?
right. So what you're doing is you're assuming a certain epistemology, and that
That
epistemology
is
has
what
to be
your
proven.
church believes, according
No,
to
no.
Doctrine and
We
Covenants,
don't-
section
we don't
130,
believe that
verse
has to be supported
22.
by the early church fathers. We believe we're in a revelatory church. So the
So,
idea that
hold on, their
supported by the
position is
church
not important
fathers
to you.
is
Hold on,
kind of-
their position is not important to you, Porter, because at the end of the day, if you're talking about the earliest traditions and the earliest interpretations of these scriptures, and then we're talking about students of the apostles themselves, okay, and not one of them holding to what Joseph comes along with almost 2,000 years later in regard to a number of doctrines that he comes out with. That for me is very concerning, okay? Because you're talking
That's
about a
epistemology,
monumental,
Gavin.
you're talking about a monumental doctrine here. God the
Right.
Father once being a man of tangible as any man's, okay? Where on earth is that laid out in the early church by any
It
early
doesn't
church
have
leader?
to be. You're just
So you
making up a
acknowledge
standard.
that none of them believe that, right?
I acknowledge that none of them believe that, and it doesn't really matter at all because
It does
you're just
matter
begging
because
your epistemology.
if
You're begging the
Joseph would have
question.
been regarded, within the early church as a complete heretic, that matters. Okay.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No.
So when the apostles, so in other words, the apostles were wrong, the students of the apostles were wrong,
No,
everyone
no.
within the early church was wrong, and just Joseph was right?
You're making an argument from silence.
I'm not
is
making
what-
an argument from
Yes, you
silence. That
are.
is the historical church argument.
No,
Okay.
it wasn't. Okay, listen.
So what is the consistent teaching on God the Father, okay, within the early church?
They don't talk about whether he had a moral experience or not because it wasn't revealed.
No, I didn't ask that. I asked what is their consistent teaching on God the Father?
There's a lot of consistent teachings that he's
On
divine,
God the
that
Father.
he gives his deity to Christ.
That he was a man?
No, who said that?
I thought you said that. Was that not what you said?
No, you're not addressing the claims we're making. So
Did any of them believe
listen,
that? Did
no.
any of them believe that, Porter?
Who cares?
I care because it matters. Because if
No, it
I'm
doesn't.
trying to verify, hold on, if I'm trying to verify Joseph's theology, I'm looking at the Bible,
Okay.
I'm looking at the apostles, and then I'm looking at the students of the apostles, and none of it lines up with Joseph. That's a serious red flag.
Okay, so can
Okay.
you tell me before the book of Obadiah when they said the Messiah's name would be Jesus Christ?
You're changing the claim.
No, it's the
You're
same
changing the
claim.
claim.
No,
Stick
it's the
with
same
God
claim,
the
but-
Father. Porter, stick with God the Father first, okay?
No. I want you to stick
You
with your
don't see the issue.
epistemology.
Porter, you don't see the issue with that.
No, because what you're
Porter,
doing is you're
do you
taking
see
a
the
random
issue? Hold on,
epistemology.
Porter.
Hold on,
Do
hey,
you see
let me
the
talk.
issue? Hold
Let
on,
me
Porter.
talk.
Do you see
No,
the
no, no.
issue? Porter, do
I've
you see
already
the
answered
issue
that
with that?
question 4 times.
No, no.
If you want to let me
But
talk,
you don't
just
see
know
the.
you're gonna
Hold on.
lose it.
You don't see the
You
red
know
flag in
your
it,
you know
Porter.
your foundation isn't stable. So just let me
But mine is
talk.
based on the evidence of what the
Hold on.
church
No,
leaders
it's
believed,
not.
as well
It's
as what the
absolutely
Bible
not
says.
based on the evidence. It's
Okay.
based on selected evidence that you're selecting.
No,
for.
it's not. Unless you want to give a source where they believe God the Father was once a man, as Joseph did.
Okay, so
So
what
how is
we're
it select
doing is
evidence if you
engaging.
can't even give me one shred of data that demonstrates that Joseph's doctrines are in line with what the
Wait, why
apostles
don't you
believe
wait for a
and what
second?
the students of the apostles believe?
Why don't you wait for a second and let me explain what's going on?
Do you have that data? Yes or no?
Do you have a sound epistemology?
Hold
Yes,
on. Do you have that data? I'm
Do you have
asking
a
you a
sound
question. You're
epistemology? Yes,
you're
no?
changing. You're
I'm doing
shifting
an
the question. Okay.
epistemological critique.
I'm asking
Because
you.
you
Do you
can't just
have it?
engage in the
Okay. If
epistemology,
you
just
don't believe,
use
hold on. If you
epistemology.
don't believe the apostles, you don't believe the Bible, and you don't
No,
believe
no.
what the students of the apostles had to say on any of
That
these
would be
issues,
called a straw
that's
man. That's not what I'm
extremely
saying.
that's extremely disturbing. Okay.
That's not
And
what
then
I'm
if you
saying.
do, you
So you're lying.
then have to answer the question:
That's
why
okay.
are they in
You can lie.
complete disagreement with
No, no, no.
Joseph?
You can lie.
Why?
That's not what I said.
Porter,
That's
why
not
are
what I
they in
said.
complete? Why are they in complete disagreement with Joseph?
Okay, they aren't in complete disagreement with Joseph.
Well,
They
prove
don't
it. Give
talk
me the
about it.
sources. Give me the sources.
Okay, so what you're saying is because something isn't explicitly stated, then they're in disagreement with Joseph.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this doctrine is monumental enough that they should be talking about it.
No.
No,
it's not.
God the Father once being a body of flesh and bones, as
Okay,
tangible
where
as
does
any man.
Obadiah say that the
I
name
mean,
of the
where
Messiah
on
is
earth
Jesus
was
Christ?
that believed?
That's a
Hold
pretty
on.
big
Where on earth
doctrine.
did they believe
Where
that,
does it
Porter?
say it? Where does it
Porter,
say
where
it?
did they believe
Where
that?
does
You're
Obadiah-
changing the
where
claim.
does
You're running from
Obadiah
the
say
God the
the
Father,
name
the
of the
claim, because you
Messiah
don't
is
want to
Jesus
address
Christ?
it. Okay. If you don't want to address it, that's fine. Okay. We can't
No,
have a
what you're
conversation,
doing
Porter.
is you
Porter,
are not
we can't have a conversation if you don't want
right.
to address the claims.
Right.
Okay.
No, I did
I
address
asked you
it 4
specifically
times.
about God the
I answered
Father.
that 4
Okay.
times,
And then
now
you want
I'm
to run
asking
to
you
an
to justify
epistemology
your
argument.
epistemology,
Okay.
which you
So
can't do.
that's literally what's going to happen, is it? That's fine. If you don't want to have a conversation, what can we do? A simple question about God the Father, and instead of answering the question, wants to have a hissy fit. What can you do in that context? I'll end with this. The argument, guys, was very simple. Okay, the argument was simply this. Okay, the apostles believed something. Okay, theologically speaking, very clearly about God. Okay, as outlined in the Bible. Then you have the students of the apostles. Okay, who also believe that, evident from their writings, which we have. And then you have all the church traditions which were maintained across history, and they're consistent with one another on that. Okay, it's only Joseph where the break happens. Okay, it's only Joseph where the break happens. Nowhere in Scripture does it say that. The consistent scholarly position on it is exactly that. Okay, that Joseph's position is wayward. Okay, because the conclusion here is that this is what they believed about God. Okay, God was, as I pointed out, the eternal sovereign Lord, the eternal sovereign Creator over all of creation. Okay, we're talking about an immaterial divine being. Okay. And there's no way within that where you can make a claim, okay, for Joseph's position. It's not taught within Scripture. We looked at Isaiah 43:10. We looked at even what scholarship has said on that, okay. We looked at other passages as well. You have Isaiah 44:6, 44:8. You also have, for example, in the Psalm 96:5, for example, Joseph's claims about there being multiple gods doesn't exist. God the Father once being man doesn't exist. Okay, Heavenly Mother doesn't exist. Okay, if all his teachings are contradictory to the scriptural witness, the biblical witness, the scholarly witness, and then the early church witness, that's the problem, guys, and that's where the issue lies. Anyway, we'll leave it there. For anyone who wants to come on, feel free to come on. Feel free to, as I said, as I said, I do this every single Friday at 7 p.m. So you guys can come on at any time, okay? You guys can come on at any time, okay? Yeah, I'll be here every Friday, mostly. I might miss maybe the odd Friday once every 2 months, but consistently, as you've seen, I've been able to do this most Fridays. And generally speaking, if I miss a Friday, I tend to do that stream then on the Saturday, the following day. But yeah, I thank you so much. I thank you guys so much for listening. It's getting late where I am now, so I'm getting tired. Feel free to check the sources. The sources were given. You're free to check the sources. Do the research, guys. Look at why no non-LDS person is agreeing with your church, and try and work yourself out of this circular reasoning stuff. Yeah, If you do that, the truth should become apparent. And until then, guys, all the best and God bless, and thank you for joining.